Fuck, you can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
Doing?
Get your able nitrate.
Man,
Go ahead.
Man, I'll tell you this show, okay, an astrologer and a fiction author will make better predictions than any sports analyst in the game. And I think we've proven that so far, but we're really going to hammer that tonight because a lot of what we talked about has come to fruition in a few major ways.
So if you're new to the show, this is my man, Dawg, beaming in from the East Coast, specifically the greater Massachusetts area, which we're going to get into tonight. And myself, I'm Robert Phoenix. And some of you might know Al from the Astro Chad series over on Old World, Florida. And maybe you know him from this show. He's been here from the beginning and is my co-host every week with Serious Sports. And this week we did a pre-record with Mark Matheny from Rabbit Hole Astrology. And Mark has a plethora of astrological charts. And we get into a lot of stuff, and some of it's predictive. And to your point, Al, we got into the predictive model. Take it away. How well did we do?
I mean, we did really well this weekend. I personally did great because, I made a big prediction that Colorado would defeat TCU, probably one of the biggest upsets in college football history, if you really look at it and what the experts were saying in comparison to, a co-host of Serious Sports. One group got it right. It wasn't the experts. It was me. And I got it right months and months in advance. And I put my money where my mouth was. So incredible weekend. So we got to talk about that real quick before we head into the NFL preview. We got to talk about these Colorado Buffaloes. And we do have to talk about the realignment, which you predicted even more so with specific teams like Cal and Stanford. We have a situation with the conferences in college sports where the conferences, some of them are getting obliterated, specifically the Pac-12. Cal and Stanford will now be headed to, get this, the Atlantic Coast Conference. And I mean, nothing says Atlantic Coast quite like Cal and Stanford. Am I right?
Right. And then throw in SMU to boot, right? They're going along for the ride as well. So I guess they're headed east and stopping in Dallas to pick up the Southern Methodist Mustangs. And those deals they're interesting. So of the three teams, Stanford, of course, has the biggest pockets. And that's really what the ACC was looking at. They wanted money. They didn't want schools to take away from their new emerging bottom line, which we're going to talk about in terms of these new conferences and relocation. Cal has, I think, close to it's either $400 or $500 million in debt to their athletic program because they made all these changes to their stadium and a lot of their other athletic facilities. So Cal brings a kind of a net negative into this. And I think SMU is sort of a net neutral. And SMU, I think they made an agreement that they're not going to take any of the TV money or something.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why the ACC let them in. Like, they're not going to cost them anything. So any profit above and beyond what they get in terms of ticket sales and merch, they're okay with. I guess they just didn't want to be left out. They wanted to be part of one of these, what is it, a Power 5 conference that we're talking about now?
That's what we're talking about. But I want to ask you real quick about SMU because they got what is known as a death sentence in college sports. And so they've been desperate to get back to their past glory. And I don't know the full details on it, but do you know a basic synopsis of what happened to the SMU program?
Yeah, so it was when Eric Dickerson and Craig James were former New England Patriot Craig James were playing for the SMU Mustangs. And it was probably football's equivalent to UNLV. Everybody was getting paid. And some players were not happy with what they were getting paid and kind of wanted to renegotiate their deals, while they were part of the team. And it was leading to some issues with the local press in Dallas. And so reporters started to sniff around SMU. And I think the chancellor of SMU was a former governor of Texas. I mean, it was really dirty, really, really dirty. And they just sat on the grenade and gave themselves the death sentence because of the amount of violations that they had. So eventually they wound up getting back into football. They always had a basketball team, and I think Larry Brown wound up coaching there sometime in the 2000s and sort of kept the SMU profile sports-wise afloat. And, they've done reasonably well returning to whatever kind of semblance of credibility. When Eric Dickerson and Craig James were there, they were very good. They called them the Pony Express. And Eric Dickerson showed up first day of practice. I think he had like this, either a Corvette or a Mustang Mach 3 or something like that, right? Like those guys were getting totally paid out. But that's what happened to them. And, I guess time changes everything. And now they've kind of wrangled their way into the Power Five, which in their minds allows them to play for a national title. And that's where all the big money starts to come in, right? I think schools are allotted shares when they go through that whole playoff process. And that's aside from the TV money.
Right.
So the TV money goes to the ACC, and then the ACC distributes it to the various schools, just like all the other conferences. But it's really weird because I grew up watching, when I was a kid, it was the Pac-8, and it was the two LA schools, the two Bay Area schools, the two kind of, Farmer Podunk, Oregon, Washington schools, and then the other two, Oregon and Washington. So Oregon State, Washington State, Oregon, Washington, Cal, Stanford, UCLA. That was it. That was the Pac-12. It was the Pac-8, and that's what I grew up watching. Jim Plunkett and Anthony Davis and Charles White and Ricky Bell and eventually Aaron Rodgers, who played at Cal. He was there, and it was great watching those teams. The UCLA basketball dynasty came through the Pac-12. You had Lou Alcindor and Bill Walton. Bill Walton was probably the greatest college basketball player I've ever seen. He was remarkable. And then later on they brought more teams in. I think they brought in the two Arizona teams. So at that point, I think they became the Pac-10. And then they brought in Utah and Colorado, and then they became the Pac-12. So it's all gone. It's all part of history. And it matches up with this balkanization of the United States that I'm seeing, and that there are certain states that have certain things in common with, so for instance, in Texas, we might have a lot more in common with a state like Montana than we do with New Mexico, who is right next to us. And that would be true, by the way. So we're starting to see a lot of these things happen. Like if you go up into the Northeast, a state like New Hampshire has a lot more in common with a state like Florida all the way down the coast than it does with its nearest neighbor, Massachusetts. So it's reflecting what's happening with these schools and these conferences realigning in ways that really look like a pro football league. That's what it looks like. It's not. It's in fact, it's even less regional than a pro football league.
Yeah, I mean, it's just funny when I talk about Cal being part of the Atlantic Coast Conference. I think that perfectly, symbolizes the insanity of what we're seeing right now. And just to give the viewers a brief background here, just a brief little snapshot. What's happening now is conferences are realigning. Some are imploding outright for the most part. Others are becoming super powerful. But the reason why, in my opinion, this is happening is because the college football playoff goes to 12 teams next year. And what these schools are after is revenue, mainly from some of these television contracts, because these
Huge.
playoffs, these bowl games are a big deal, just in terms of the revenue that is brought in with these games. And you mentioned the Pac-12. It's really disappointing that the Pac-12 is at 2 teams right now currently,
Right.
for next year, because currently the Pac-12 after week 1 is the only conference to be undefeated against non-conference opponents. We're talking about USC, we're talking about Colorado, we're talking about Washington, Oregon, Washington. Traditionally, West Coast teams are now joining Midwestern conferences, traditionally like the Big Ten, or outright East Coast. Like the ACC is derivative of something that was formerly known as the Big East Conference, right? Which,
Well, the ACC has been around for a long time.
okay,
Like
okay,
the Big East kind of got folded in
yeah,
to these other, like the Patriot Conference, and I don't know what happened to all the Big East, but teams. Big East was great for basketball,
it was, yeah,
but to your point, things are just really odd because Oregon State has had more teams in the last 5 years across all their sports go to either championship or championship level games. Like Oregon State baseball is really good, and Oregon State basketball, like Elite Eight, Sweet 16, right? They've been there. Oregon State's football team has been in the top 15 or top 10 teams in the last, and that's not including track and field, which is always big at Oregon State. So it's really weird that a smaller school and is kind of a national power, and there's kind of on the outside looking in. Meanwhile, Cal, which is this really liberal bastion of like politics, right? And they're actually going to be playing in a conference that a lot of the professors there and the liberal talking heads would kind of blanch over, right? Because some of the Southern schools and Southern traditions are very, very different than what theoretically Cal is used to. But I think the thing that's really interesting around all of this is the number 12, and bringing it back to astrology. There's 12 houses, right? And we have 12 signs. So this is a really interesting development as it relates to this number 12. Of course, we have 12 apostles. 12 is a 12 hours in one part of the day, 12 hours in another part of the day. So it's a really, really interesting number and does have a lot of resonance with what we're talking about here.
wow. Yeah, I guess I brought up the Big East sort of just because it's an example of a conference that imploded. And with the Pac-12, 2 teams, like you mentioned, Oregon State, they're going to have to find a home. And you previously predicted that they would be ending up in the Mountain West. Do you think
Right.
that's still the most likely situation?
I don't know. It would clearly be a step down
Yeah,
for
big time.
for both of those programs.
Yeah,
And I don't know where they go. I mean, I guess. I mean, as long as Boise State is pretty good at football, and I don't know. I would try to just re-wrangle everything, and I would try to snatch Gonzaga away, even if it's just for basketball.
right.
It's gonna be really, really weird. Like
Yeah,
there's tradition. Like I forget what they call it. I think it's called the Apple Cup between Washington State and Washington. They're not going to have that anymore,
right.
right? And the regional game between Oregon State and Oregon, they're not going to have that anymore. Like Cal and Stanford can still play each other because they're still
Right.
going to be in the same conference. But yeah, I mean, all those traditions, they're going to be gone.
Yeah.
And,
So it's kind of like, just like with American traditions that are kind of being thrown out right now, some of these conference traditions are being straight up thrown the fuck out just in favor of getting in on this massive college football playoff, which is, it's going to be a huge thing. And it's going national. It's like, these conferences aren't pretending to be regional anymore. They're like, fuck it, we're national. We're going coast to coast with these conferences. So does USC and USA plan on coming to wrestle at Iowa?
absolutely,
Yeah,
that's the plan.
they're
Yep.
Big Ten schools now, right? So, well, they will be in the next coming years. So,
Yeah. It's going to be very strange, and it's going to put a strain on certain programs. And I made a prediction that they're gonna do something with Title IX, because I don't think that the way that these programs are set up now with these various colleges
Right.
can exist with these travel schedules.
And
And
Title IX, just so people know, is women's athletics, correct?
yeah. And
Okay.
somebody said in one of the comments, I think it was after the first show, not in chat, but in the comments,
Yeah.
that there's no way that they would pull back Title IX. Well, did you think that about affirmative action? Right. I think a lot of people thought affirmative action was here to stay. And clearly that's not the case. The abortion issue was always on the topic for discussion, right? And eventually, of course, they just said, here, states, you go figure this out. We're living in a time where there just doesn't seem to be any sacred cows anymore. Like, I hear the Biden administration, they're rattling their sabers about ending gun ownership and even curtailing things like hunting and fishing. Things that they have said, well, you don't need to have an automatic rifle to go hunt, do you? Well, they're putting a prohibitive measure, theoretically, even on hunting. So these things that we thought were immutable, looks like that whole prospect of immutability is kind of moving. They're moving the Overton windows. What is really what they're doing. So I would not be surprised if they may not pull Title IX completely, but they can certainly restructure it. And it wouldn't be the same as it's been since it was passed, I think in the 70s, like we're at 76 or something like that. So I just don't see how they can hold up these travel schedules for these really minor sports, fly all the way across the country to, I don't know, go play, field hockey somewhere.
I know. I was going to mention field hockey. It's just so absurd, man. It's it's going to reach a point within the next couple of years where I think the bullshit's going to be removed if you want to sustain. College football is professional. At this point, it's and fucking field hockey will never be professional. Okay,
Right.
And the money's going to increase. The gambling is going to increase. So it's going to become sort of a Wild West, if you will, just all the way across the board here.
My question is, what happens to the other, I don't know how many schools that aren't in the Power Five? I'm not sure how that all plays out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's regional TV money involved, but it's not huge.
Mm-hmm.
These regional games and rivalries have been broken. And what are they playing for? Like, what is Washington State and Oregon State going to play for now?
Right.
I mean, theoretically, nothing. So if I were somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, you are an impresario and you have unlimited funds, I would figure out a way to create basically a rival league with the Power Five. That's what I would do.
Okay.
I would say, okay, who can we create a rival situation with? And I would have it be something along the lines of, instead of 12 teams, I would have a really huge playing field of teams. Like, that basically every team that was left in the nation, I would have them be part of like one conference, and that they would just keep playing and whittling down to eventually you would get to a reasonable playoff size. And I'd go head to head with these other schools. And because I think it would be a lot more interesting if you had like one super league like that. And then you take the rest of the remaining bowl games and then you basically go head to head with this other, and you would hope that it would be a numbers game, right? Like you would just bank on all these other teams still left to say, okay, we're unifying. We're not going to have these, little kind of, yeah, we can use our little conference names just as kind of a placeholder, but it'll be the Power Five against everybody else. And I think what I would do is create like an AFL NFL situation, and then challenge the winner of the Power Five to play the winner of whoever's left over out of the field, the scrum.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. Make it interesting.
Yeah. I see what you're saying a little bit, but just to mention Oregon State, I think they're going to be okay because they're ranked number 18 right now. As we see college football become professional more officially, I don't think they're going to get left behind because they're a team in a program that wins with
Yeah,
NIL and they
yeah,
win with the transfer portal. Because guess what? Oregon State, they got the quarterback from Clemson last year. He didn't have a great year at Clemson, so guess what? Now he's the quarterback at Oregon State. So the switching of the teams combined with the NIL and the transfer portal to me just equates to professionalism. And if you're a large institution with branding power, like an Oregon State, like a Clemson, like a University of North Carolina, like a Duke, you're going to do very, very well. But what we're seeing, in my opinion, is this scramble, just this desperation with teams like, SMU, as we mentioned, to become professional because they do not want to professional in a sense to join this professional class, this sort
yeah.
of cast, because they do not want to get left behind, like you're saying, because they realize, hey, if we get left behind in the next couple of years, if we don't join one of these major conferences in the next couple of years, we're fucked. And
Yeah.
we're going to be the fucking B league in comparison to these astronomical powers that we won't be able to catch up to because they have so much institutional and branding power and just so much money is in the game right now. I learned a lot about NIL recently over the weekend, man. It's so the schools don't pay you directly, right? You have your your name, image, and likeness that you can get paid through if you're a big star. Donors, like what's it called? Boosters. They
Right.
can rally together and then
Yep.
pay the players. So
Right.
it's like
Yep.
if you have rich alumni and they want to win, which they do, they want to bring their
Yep.
clients from their businesses to a winning football program on a Saturday. They're going to put a lot of cash into this. So we're
Yep.
seeing just a raising of the stakes, and teams don't want to get left behind because they're going to be in the third world of college football.
Well, Tondar basically illustrated or articulated my idea, like March Madness, but the bracket holds 512 schools. I agree with that. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
I would basically say, okay, we're starting another conference that's going to compete with these guys. We're the field, but we're all going to organize so that we're going to essentially come into our playoffs at the same time during the bowl season that these guys have. So it's a little bit like the NIT, the NC. Now people may not remember this, but the NIT was the premier tournament
Huh.
back in the day, and the NC2As were started by Jerry Reinsdorf of the Chicago Bulls. So Reinsdorf, they started that whole thing, right? I think they did it before they wound up buying the Bulls and the White Sox, but that was their idea. So the NC2As and March Madness, they're late to the party. It really was the NIT, the National Invitation Tournament. So now the NIT is sort of the not so pretty sister
Right.
that you're going to get stuck with on the date. But Mary Lee brings this up. She says, I don't like this portal crap. How do you feel about it, Al? My sense is that you're into it. You like it. Let's take away let's take the training wheels off this thing and let's let the dollars decide how this thing is going to get played out. Am I right about that? Where are you with the transfer portal?
So as it stands now, I'd like to see it actually capped a little bit because if you have a player who can transfer 2 to 3 times, it hurts the traditionalism so much that the lack of loyalty I find not as enticing as you might think, right? Because I'm okay with a player transferring once, maybe twice. But you got a lot of players now that are transferring a lot, that are
Right.
transferring 2 to 3 times.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think it should be limited, okay? And it is in a sense. But it's sort of a free for all right now. And the thing is, oh yeah, I'm transferring for, anything other than football and anything other than I'm not getting enough playing time, or anything other than I can get more money at this other school is bullshit. That's why players are transferring. Playing time and money. Okay,
Yeah.
that's why they're doing it. Personally, I'd like to have the bullshit removed and people just be honest about that. But for now, where we're at now, I'd like to see it capped a little bit because I am in favor of players being able to transfer because it breeds a lot of success stories. You go to Georgia, you're behind 4 or 5 other freak athletes, then you transfer to, Cal or something and you're a star player. That stuff happens all the time. So I'm in favor of transfers, but I would limit it to 2 transfers. I think I would limit it to 2
To
instead of
2.
like 3.
Mary Lee's got 1. I do think limits would be good
Mm-hmm.
because Orson Welles, of course, who
Mm-hmm.
created Citizen Kane, one of his most famous quotes, is the lack of limitation is the enemy of art.
Wow.
And he found that out personally because after he did Citizen Kane, he could do anything he wanted, and he did, and he overindulged in creative excess. I mean, literally, you can see the guy at the end of his life. He had very few limits in terms of his appetites. But I think if you don't have any defined, the stakes are just higher when you have defined limits,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to make smarter choices. So I think the orphan train of the transfer portal doesn't really work
Right.
for me. And I don't care if it's 1 or 2. I think maybe 2 is probably the better number
Yeah.
because you get 1 gimme, right? 1 mulligan. And after
Mm-hmm.
that, you're the next one you're done. So you better make the second one work,
Right.
right? Because there's no
Exactly.
turning back.
Make it work where you're at is, that shows more character than, going somewhere where the grass is greener. But I'd extend that even to professional sports. Even as a youth, I always found it discouraging when there's
Yeah.
a new fucking roster every year. Like, you know what I mean? Like with something like the Red Sox I grew up watching. It's like, okay, I like these guys. I've grown attached to this team. And then, the next year it's an entirely different group of people. It's like, I don't know. I don't know these people. I don't
Dude,
know these
listen,
guys.
I've sat through years of Moneyball with the A's.
Yeah.
So it's like it's like, don't get attached to the laundry.
Yeah.
So Nug says the portal and NIL is making a level playing field. Well, not for the lower tier FBS and FCS. So he's right in terms of like
Mhm.
what Deion Sanders did with the transfer portal and basically flushing his team and saying, look, we're gonna. It was kind of like an AAU travel team. It's like we're just gonna get all the best AAU travel team players that want to play at the school, for lack of a better term. So it's historic, and yeah, they went from being a team that won 1 game last year to beating the team that played in the national championship this season.
Yeah.
So Nugs is correct, but I think that even the playing field amongst the the Power 5 conferences, even that'll be tiered off. Like there's no way that SMU, which we were just talking about, can really compete, I think, on a level playing field with Alabama or Georgia. It's not going to happen, right? So even in that world, you'll see certain, like maybe out of the Power 5, maybe the top 30% of those teams will
Yeah.
be the teams that will. So you know, I don't want to sound like the get off the lawn guy, right? Get off my lawn, but I like regional rivalries.
Mhm.
I like the fact that players would create a profile for their time in college,
Yeah.
and that the next level, which would be the NBA or the NFL, would then piggyback on 3 years of that person getting a marketing program. Like, so there's some Kentucky fans that are in the audience tonight. Right. So when I was a kid growing up, watch basketball. Who did I hear about? Jack Givens, Jack Goose Givens, right? And I didn't know that Jack Givens was not really an NBA ready player, but as a kid, I thought he was. And I thought, well, how could this guy not be in the NBA? I mean, that's all I do is see him on TV, and he's being talked about. And he never made it in the NBA, but they got my head wrapped around it. It's like, oh, this guy's going to be great, right? And they're going to miss out on that. So I think this has a downstream effect with the pro games, and I think that college football ultimately will be in competition with pro football.
Big time.
And that's
I mean,
yeah. So that's, and you're going to see guys in college football. I guarantee you, we're already seeing it. Like the guy who plays at Gonzaga, right? He played there for like 6 years or something like that,
mhm.
right? There are players who can redshirt and they get a couple extra years. They could play college football for 5 or 6 years.
Exactly. And you're basically a pro for those 6 years. And with the ACC becoming a lot more powerful now, getting a lot more money with Stanford and Cal additions, especially with Stanford, like you mentioned, but the SEC next year acquires Oklahoma and Texas, 2 massive institutions, 2 massive brands. So, I mean, we can't discount the ACC because last night Florida State kicked the shit out of LSU, which you might not expect. But I mean, with the implosion of the Pac-12, I think we're seeing an emergence of power with the ACC, the SEC, and the Big Ten, right? And the Big 12 will still be around a little bit, but I mean, it might not be a Power 5 anymore. It'll be a Power 3 or 4. Probably a Power 3.
So this is an interesting comment. Nug says, if not for NIL, Williams Nwaneri would be going to UGA instead of Mizzou. That's a win for everyone. One team doesn't hoard all the 5-star talent.
Yeah.
So I guess
I see
he's
what you're
saying
saying.
that he's saying that Missouri got it. Well, I mean, they used to do this anyway. It was just called under the table and boosters, and but yeah, now it's just above board. So for
I see what
every
he's saying, though.
Williams Nwaneri,
Yeah.
there's 3 of those guys that'll go play at UGA,
Uh-huh.
right? I mean, seriously, because they have the profile and they'll have the boosters. But I understand what he's saying here.
Yeah, I see what he's saying too, because a backup at Alabama or a backup at Georgia could make your freaking program a lot better. You know what I mean? And they're not getting any time at those massive institutions,
Yeah.
or those just powerhouses. So, but they could make a huge difference somewhere else. So in that sense, I'm in favor of these things.
I think we can look back to when players could transfer out of their districts for high school as the beginning of all of this, because that's when it all started to happen. And you could have these like what is it, the Live Oak Academy in Virginia, which became this basketball powerhouse because all these kids could show up there and go there and play there. And now that's even been supplanted by like the IG Academy in
Right.
Florida.
IMG down in
IMG
Florida.
Academy. So
Yeah.
you can see that the high schools, right, and the secondary schools have really changed. They were the ones that kind of changed the model, because if you went out of your district to go play for like a powerhouse school, most of the time, the outgoing district wouldn't let you do it, right? Or there could be rules with the incoming district. I think some of the Catholic schools, like powerhouses like De La Salle, also created that environment in California, and creating these super teams. Mater Dei also in basketball.
Yeah.
But
Oak
I
Hill
think
in basketball.
Oak Hill Academy in Virginia. Yeah, so I think that we're going to see college football take on pro football again, the way it was back in the 1930s and in the 40s, when college football and teams like Fordham was a really big college football team. And
Wow, I didn't know that.
They were super popular. And so you had Fordham and the military schools and Notre Dame. Some of the Ivy League schools were really big into football back in the day. So eventually pro football comes along and begins to tilt the playing field, particularly when they have a team in LA. The LA Rams change professional football forever because they get associated with Hollywood. They're on newsreels, right? So now all of a sudden they're much more glamorous in some ways than the college game. But the college game was considered to be on a par. There were some guys, I don't think they ever played pro football. They just played. I think Glenn Davis was one of those guys.
Okay.
And he was this great college football player. And then I think he went into the armed services and he never played in the NFL.
Huh.
So it's a brave new world, and traditionalists are probably not going to like it. Free marketeers may like it a lot more. And ultimately, will we settle down and get used to it? I think like most things, there's probably a point where that happens. But the wild card is the gambling bit, and we talked
Yeah.
about that last week. And you brought up Sam Deckers from Iowa State and the amount of bets that he made, and we touched on him briefly. So I think that's the other side of this, right? It's like all the pitfalls that go along with huge amounts of money and boosters. And you want to tell people, like, how guys with NIL clout and guys without NIL clout sort of have this clash on these teams?
Well, I anticipate a situation, and I think this is happening all over the country. Like, if you got these guys on some college teams making big money, imagine how that socially plays out with a guy who's a second or third string defensive end, not making any money, or not making a significant amount of money in comparison to the running back, or perhaps the corner, wide receiver, quarterback who's potentially making millions. Now, let's say in the case of Iowa State, you mentioned a quarterback, but they also had a defensive lineman on that same team that got caught gambling as well. So
Right.
as a defensive lineman starting, you can make a huge impact. And let's say you're not making money, the big money that, the big time players are. How else would you make money? Perhaps you don't rush the quarterback as hard as you could. Perhaps in the third quarter, you get a little bit tired to the point where it affects the game. And, meanwhile, you had somebody else place a bet for you. And now you're not this broke guy anymore. You're doing pretty well financially, better than you were in comparison to the social dynamics of some players making big money and others not, I think is going to lead to actually more players gambling because it's easy, it's accessible. And in a state like Massachusetts, where I am now, it's perfectly legal. So it would be nothing. Let's say I'm a defensive lineman at Boston College. My team sucks this year. I'm looking at the point spread online. Got a buddy down the dorm. You want to make a play because I can make this play for us. Right? That's a situation I can see happening all over the country. You know what I mean? If you just play out the social dynamics.
Right. Well, it's real easy if you're an offensive lineman, miss a block at a key time.
Right.
Key third down.
Yeah.
Right? Guy comes through, you do a little matador, and then next thing you know, changes the game. And you've got to
You
handle
wouldn't even have to go that far. You could go off sides. You know what I mean? Or you could hold,
Well, you could, or you could just let him sack the quarterback.
Yeah.
That put an end to that.
Right.
Southwest Florida real estate with my man Lewis Walden. Nothing is the same anymore. I feel like I'm living in a different parallel universe. Yeah, I mean, when Pluto went into Aquarius, bringing it back to astrology, it felt like we just opened a portal. When I started to hear the language of the transfer portal, it's a really interesting terminology. They didn't call it the transfer window, right? They didn't call it the transfer door. They didn't call it the transfer option. They called it the transfer portal.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So when Pluto comes back into Aquarius, I
Yeah.
think we're getting a foreshadowing. Everything is going to be different. Like the sports world is going to be different. I think when Pluto goes back into Aquarius, we should have an actual conversation about things like esports and other types of gaming. That'll potentially be things that we right now we may not even be able to like wrap our heads around where things are going. So I feel like the transfer portal was really synonymous with Aquarius and how just upside down and topsy-turvy and inverted things are.
Yeah. That's really interesting because when you say the word portal, it's almost as if you're at one school, you're in one world, you go through the portal, you're in a completely different world.
Right, exactly. I think of like Stargate Atlantis, right? I mean, that's what I think of.
Yeah.
And this is kind of how this thing has morphed into. And I mean, there's some interesting, corollaries with time and physics and how, we don't define them the same way, especially when it comes, because before you used to have to sit out a year,
Right.
right? You had to sit out a year before you could go to another school. And that was a time factor, right? Like a year was a year. And it was like excruciatingly a year for somebody who was 19 or or 20 years old. You remember how those years would just like sometimes be very long? Like
Oh
now,
yeah.
from my perspective, a year is over in a heartbeat, right?
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's what it feels like. It just feels like going from one reality to another with, and portal wise, that's really Aquarius because we've been in Capricorn with Pluto and Capricorn since 2008, and Capricorn rules time. So now everything is instant. It's like on demand, and the transfer is on demand, and the betting is on demand. You can bet on, is this going to be a ball or a strike? I mean, that's how, it's like your virtual roulette wheel. I'm going to bet strike here,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So, I mean, that's where it's all going. And anybody who's looked to sports for consistency, you better like re-rack that. I mean, even the NBA is going to go into their mid-season tournament, which I think is fucking ridiculous, but apparently do this in Europe and other places like that.
Yeah. I don't
But
know
again,
much about that. What's
yeah.
going on with that?
Well, so they have these games that are part of the schedule.
Okay.
Right? It's not like they're going to all meet together at, I don't know, Jerry World and play the tournament. So there are games that are assigned through the schedule that count as like tournament games.
Oh wow. Okay.
So those wins against those teams during those tournament games are important.
Okay.
And it all happens in the mid-season. So like it's not like, well, we're gonna play, this game. We're gonna play like if you're the Warriors and you play the Spurs in October, your next tournament game is not going to happen in February. Like that's all within a period of time.
Huh.
So all those games count during that period of time, and they're all baked into the schedule. And so after that tournament, right, theoretically, they would have one team that would have the best record. And then I think they would have like tiebreakers set up, things like points for, points against. So during that period, it would also behoove a team to score as many points as possible while keeping the other team from scoring as many as possible, right? So there are all these tiebreakers that funnel down. And
That's
then,
interesting.
and that team who wins the in-season tournament, I think, has home court advantage throughout the playoffs. I think that's what they're wrangling.
Okay. I mean, I'm kind of happy to hear that because the NBA regular season kind of sucks. Okay. It's if I look at the schedule sometimes, I'll see what's going on later that night. Maybe I'll catch a game on my laptop or something. Let's say it's the Mavericks and the Lakers. I'm like, oh, cool. Luka and LeBron are playing. I might check that out for 5 minutes, see what's going on. And then you go to watch and LeBron's sitting out. Oh, Luka's sitting out too. That happens all the time with the NBA. And
the whole load management thing. You know how so this is a really interesting thing to bring up. And then we should probably shift into our show with Mark.
Right. Yeah.
But the whole sports science phenomenon, which really starts at the University of Oregon, and Phil Knight pays a shit ton of money. And Phil Knight and Chip Kelly. When Chip Kelly was at Oregon, he totally got into the whole sports science thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when they would like basically track you 24/7. And this is what happens with players now. They're monitored 24/7. And they look at their periods of rest and relaxation and activity. So they create like this biometric profile on all their players. So then what happens is that if they'll come up with all these numbers, and the number will say, he's got to rest tonight. Like this is a load management night.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happens. It's not like the coach is saying, hey, you're going to, no, they're leaning into the metrics, the biometrics that they're getting back from all their prodding, poking, taking their respiratory count, all that shit. Right. So when they ask these players and they say, well, why do you do load management? They'll say, well, I don't have a choice.
Wow.
I don't have a choice for load management because I'm being monitored by the team doctor and the team medical staff. And it is the program that is telling me when I can or cannot play. Think about how that translates into quote unquote real life, with our own biometrics, being scanned, or whether they're coming through a COVID test, or whether they're coming through something that's, reading our, eye twitch count or whatever, right? I mean, there's this bleed through, I think, ultimately with sports, because they'll R&D this stuff. Just like a war, they go out and they R&D all these, tricks. And then they just, kind of cross transfer it over to the general population. Oh, well, you can't do this, or you can't do this, or, oh yeah, you need to, it's like right now they've just hired, I'm sorry to make this political, but they just, they're hiring an alcohol czar, right? So
No shit.
they want to keep people to 2 beers a week now. And how do you think all this is going to happen? You'll be monitored. You'll be monitored by the biometric program. And they're pioneering all this stuff in sports, right? So all this sports technology and sports science is really, and it gets into this whole third party kind of, nobody wants to take responsibility for it, but the third party is the one, that ubiquitous third party that tells you, well, I can't play tonight. You mean coach didn't say it? No, coach didn't say it. You mean the general manager said? No, general manager said. It's just what the sports science team said. And where are you going to hear that? You're going to hear that with like the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization. You know what I mean? So
yeah, it's the same thing, dude, because these sports scientists are given all this power, right? So let's say I'm a sports scientist on a team, or they're going to say, oh, you tested positive for this week. You're not playing for 2 weeks. You know what I'm saying? Right. That gives them an insane amount of power.
It could absolutely.
Yeah.
It hasn't bled over into like college basketball, because their schedule isn't quite like the NBA. They may have, 2, if they're lucky, 3 games a week, right? But I'm just looking at it from the general population, and it's like load managing everybody, right? Because they're working on that technology. And when we move into the outer planets, bring this back to astrology, I've talked about this before, when Pluto's in Aquarius and Uranus is in Gemini and Saturn is in Aries and Neptune is in Aries, there's no ground. There's no earth in any of that. And really, that's from basically the end of 2025 to 2030. And that's when science really takes hold, right? That's when technology is just ubiquitous and it's everywhere. And not always with the best results. Now, I do think that we'll deal with some very interesting, like strange adoption, right? Just strange adoption, weird novelty. Like some of that stuff is going to come through, and some of it will not be in our best interests, right? And especially if people are running around having to do tests for whatever the next virus is. So it's going to be a very interesting, weird time. And we're already seeing that on the sports science side happening with certainly pro basketball. Pro football is completely different, but they got 1 game a week, and they're going to gut it out. But anyway, we should probably get on with the main event here.
Let's do that. I want to make a few quick notes. I had a great weekend because I've predicted on the first show we did together was with Dr. Narco Longo on the what was it? Astrology of the NFL. We did that first show, and on that show I predicted, hey guys, Colorado over TCU week 1. That was months and months ago. So I've been, as a fiction author, I pay attention to narrative with sports, right? Especially with futures predictions. And like I said at the beginning of the show, a fiction author and an astrologer are going to make far better predictions than any sports analyst out there. And I think the first 4 or 5 weeks of the show have proven that. So, but anyways, I had an awesome weekend because I had that game, Colorado, TCU, on my mind ever since the schedule came out. Placed a few bets, won big. I just wanted to mention that because that was the highlight of my weekend by far. And in regards to the
all right,
NFL
we are back for another
we're
edition
back. All right,
of.
Let's go. Sorry. Let's do this.
Are we still live now? It automatically just loads. I don't know why it does that.
Okay.
So I was just loading the video. So what Al is telling you is that he won big on a bet. He's not really telling you, but he won big on a bet, and you called it way back then. And we actually get into a little bit of the symbolism of the buffalo as it relates to Jupiter and Taurus. and one of the teams I talk about is the Buffalo Bills, also another symbolic team in terms of the astrological alignments here. So why don't we get going?
Let's do
And
it.
we'll set the stage for you. This is myself and Al from last Wednesday night with
Yeah.
Mark Matheny.
Real quick,
From,
I want to say before we play this, I was in the deep end, okay, on this show that everybody's about to watch. This is our NFL preview. I was in the deep end astrologically. I'm still intro to astrology, taking the course, doing some reading. I'm on Astro Chads, but I was certainly, in the deep end with these guys, okay, as they went deep into it, but it was a lot of fun. NFL preview. This guy, Mark, is incredible. I can't wait to talk to him again about college sports, perhaps the NBA. But this guy's into the astrology, to say the least.
Oh yeah, so, I've known Mark for years now, and he's been a guest on my other shows. And the thing that is amazing about Mark is the depth of his charts that he has on command and on demand. And so we were, Al would bring something up like, well, what about Tua and Mike McDaniel? And then there was Mark right there with the two charts, and we're going through, where you can see everything in line. We're doing team, coach, quarterback. So this is all really next level stuff with astrology that we're doing here. And yeah, we took you and we threw you out into the deep end on the show. You were great. You were great. You knew when to ask questions and chime in and ask, what does this mean? So let's get going. It's about a 2-hour show, and I think Al and I are going to be in chat here for a little bit, and we'll be in the bleachers with you. Okay, so here we go. The NFL preview, the Astro preview with Mark Matheny from Rabbit Hole Astrology, and then I'll be back at the end of the show. I'm not sure if Al will be here, but I'll be here to sign off. And let's take it away.
Serious sports, and we're going to get fucking serious tonight because we have the man, my astrological brother from another mother, Mark Matheny, with us from Rabbit Hole Astrology, and he is loaded with charts on players, coaches, the season itself. We're going to break this thing down, and of course, Mr. Serious himself, Al Dawg.
What's up, guys? Hey, I'm looking forward to seeing what's going on in the sky and how that's going to play out with this upcoming football season. So, Mark, it's a pleasure to have you. Welcome to Serious Sports.
Thank you.
Before we jump in, Mark, I gave a little bit of a brief intro, but why don't you just tell people how long that you've been practicing astrology and give them a sense of the depth of what you've got on tap in terms of charts for all these players in management and teams.
The depth of my psychosis.
Yeah, your psychosis, your obsession.
So to go way back, I guess. So like when I was little, like right after Lincoln was assassinated, we didn't have like video games and stuff. So we would like literally lay out our football cards and stuff and make up scoring, throw dice, cards, whatever, and give player yardage and whatnot. So I've been keeping real or fictitious stats since like 1974, probably. Then I ended up being the manager for my high school basketball team and the stat person my last year in high school. And then in the spring of 1985, I started working on televised TV and radio games, mostly high school, but like women's pro basketball and college women's basketball and stuff like that. Then Division III men's. So I've been keeping stats at one form or another for 49 years or something like that. When I started getting into astrology in around 92, probably. And then once I, geeked out and then figured out you can, it's not just, relationships and stuff like that, that you could apply it to mundane stuff like sporting events, elections, that kind of stuff. I started I used to just put like all the players' planetary data into like Excel spreadsheets and stuff and sort it and just like ad nauseum and make adjustments and whatnot and look through players that way. Then I finally got a software system about 5-6 years ago, and so I've got not every player, but all the like skill position players for football for all the NFL teams. I've got pretty much all the NBA and Major League Baseball players, birth data in. I've got charts for the 4 main professional sports for all the teams. I also spent, I don't even want to think about how much time I've spent tracking down charts for the college football and basketball teams. So I probably got 100 and some college football, 200 college basketball. As far as emailing school resource directors and media.
That is nerdy. That is so nerdy.
So like I'll go search online for teams media guides if I don't have a birth date, and that way even to see if I can find the birth date. And so in this software you can create signatures just like Sun sextile Mercury equals so many points and all this stuff. I've got hundreds of signatures I've created to run various things, and I'm constantly tweaking and adjusting these as
You're like
you're
assigning values to like sextiles and squares and
and I will like study. I mean, I've studied box scores since I was probably 7.
Yeah.
You used to grab your Pop-Tarts in the newspaper in the morning and you're looking at the box scores to see who scored
I was the same way. Were you like that, Al? Did you I mean, it's newspapers, right? They had these things.
No, I was a Sports Center in the morning guy, but I would watch the same Sports Center probably 2 to 3 times in that same morning.
Right.
Yeah.
This is all pre-Sports Center. The Sunday paper was always the best because it had the most extensive. Like you could get the entire, current batting averages, for the National League and the American League during the week. You'd get like the top 10 for both leagues, and you get home runs, RBIs, maybe stolen bases, right? And then you get some pitching stats. But Sunday was the day to really geek out with sports. Go ahead.
Like it was so archaic back then that like now, as soon as they have a 3-hour Sports Center show when the NFL schedules come out. Like back then, you'd have to wait until the Street and Smith or Athlon or Sports Illustrated yearly guide came out to find out who your team was even playing that year.
Right. Yeah. I remember that. Now it's just all instant. It's like you're finding out who's on the practice squad as players get signed up and lined up. Within like there are guys for every team in the NFL, multiple guys. And they're reporting like, who's now on the practice squad. And before you'd have to wait a couple of days. And
Like today was the big cut day in the NFL. I know like a bunch of guys that got cut and everybody knows instantaneously. I mean, the information is so available. I know which high school kids are getting recruited into which colleges nowadays. It's a whole media sphere that's ever expanding, really.
Yeah. I think there's pros and cons to it. For sure. I mean, the ubiquity of the information, I think, is great. But I also think that there's a bleed over into, what we call fandom or the spectator side, which is what you and I got into a couple of weeks ago, Al, which is this kind of on-demand, like instant sort of gratification that translates over into a team. Like if they're not winning in 2 seasons, like they just want to burn the house down now.
Right. And you see that with people, and I'm talking about myself a little bit here, that aren't necessarily loyal to their city or their region's sports teams. Because if your team's not winning, guess what? I like this team now because they're winning. I know so many people who've done that.
I know a
throughout
lot
the
of front
years.
runners. They're
So.
they're horrible. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the lack of instant gratification will lead to a lack of loyalty. And for me, for example, this year, I really want to know about Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets astrologically, because in my view, I think they're the team to watch.
So let's ease into the pro football story here and some of the storylines. But before we do that, Mark, I got to ask you, geography is really important with astrology, like where you're born and where the planets and the constellations, signs, fixed stars, where they were on that day tells your story, right? So there's a regional component to everybody's astrological chart. And Al and I have been talking about what's going on with the NC2A and how you have these teams in like the Pac-12 that are moving over to the Big 12. You've got Cal and Stanford, having a flirtation with the ACC. So we're taking these teams out of their locality, and the leagues that they're in or will be in, they were started on a certain day and time, right? So now you're having a new astrological relationship geographically with these teams, relocation, playing them, right, every year now. And you're dealing with the matrix, the astrological matrix of the ACC or the Big 12. What are your thoughts on that? And how is this going to affect the charts of, say, Stanford, Cal, UCLA, Southern California? Have you given this any thought?
A little bit. So I have a really good Venus retrograde story regarding that.
Okay.
So we've got this Venus retrograde in Leo, and it's working up to an exact square to Jupiter and Taurus. So right around when Venus went retrograde, University of Colorado, who was in the Pac 10, 12, 18.
They're in the Pac-12
whatever.
right now.
Yeah, so they're going to the Big 12,
Right.
which is where they used to be.
Yeah.
So during a Venus retrograde, they're going back to their X, and it's square Jupiter, which is expansion. Jupiter's the biggest planet, so it's expansion. And also Colorado is a Leo state which is where Venus is now. And Colorado is the buffaloes, which is cattle, which is ruled by Taurus.
Wow.
So the Venus Jupiter square, with Venus going retrograde, Venus went back, or Colorado went back to their X, which is the Big 12.
Well, it's wild that Colorado is a Leo state because they just got Deion Sanders coach, and he is a Leo, and he's put them really in the national spotlight, which is a very Leo thing to do, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I've even got the Colorado, and this is a little fun game that I like to do. You can look at you look at the so if there's anybody who's a general manager of a sports team, I can like save you $100 million to put together a team for you, no doubt. If you look at any, like the main player, like historically for like any sports team, that player's chart will interact with the team's chart. So even we do, so for example, Colorado's football chart has a Moon Mars conjunction at 14 degrees Leo. So just like you would do with synastry, like if you compare two people's charts, you can compare your chart to the chart of a company that you work for or what to work for. Players charts will hit in the chart if they're going to do well there. It will hit well in the chart of the team or state, city where they would be playing. And the same thing too, like you'll see the guy does crappy for 2 or 3 teams, keeps getting traded. Then he finally lines up with that team whose chart goes good with his, and then like they suddenly take off, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, why the heck did why did he play so crappy at these other places?" And it's like, well, his chart did not mesh with the chart of that state or that team's chart.
Right. And the relocation, even the relocation with the astrocartography. I've always felt that there are teams where there are guys that they just kill the team. Like they just kill that team all the time. And if I was a general
I'll take
manager,
Bryce Harper for 200, please.
yeah, right. Russell Wilson always kills the 49ers. He could stink for like one of the few wins the Broncos had last season was against the 49ers. It was Russell Wilson. But if I was a general manager, I would get the team killer. I'd get as many team killers as possible because there's going to be a correlation with those exact things that you talked about.
Yeah. So I believe I know Russell Wilson is a Sagittarius.
Yep.
And I believe the 49ers have a configuration with a couple planets in Gemini in their chart, so that that his Sagittarius sun is kind of the kryptonite to the 49ers chart.
Yeah. Here's an interesting example. And I think you'd really have to look at the difference between, say, the 49ers and the Raiders. Jim Plunkett, who came from Stanford, and he was a Heisman Trophy winner. I think it was 2 years in a row, if I'm not mistaken, or one. He was a Heisman Trophy winner. He was great. He gets drafted by the Patriots. It's a bad story, like no talent, gets beat up. He gets traded to the 49ers. So he's coming back to the place where geographically he's had success. And it's a terrible time. Joe Thomas is the general manager. He's horrible. They can't really assemble an offensive line. And then he's gone again, right? And then he doesn't show up until he winds up with the Raiders. And then all of a sudden, he's like Jim Plunkett from Stanford again. So the geographic part for Plunkett ultimately works out. But for whatever reason, whether it's Joe Thomas or the 49ers chart, it didn't work out. So it's an interesting study in geography and space and time, but two different influences coming from two different astrological matrices for different teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And just because like I'll tell people like when a game gets delayed, or if like there's a rain delay in a baseball game or something like that can totally change the outcome of, because you can get it down to like if the moon is applying to Jupiter if it's a 1 o'clock game, if something happens, it gets moved to 4 or 7 o'clock that night, then the moon can be past that conjunction to Jupiter, and then you're totally changing the outcome of the game.
Right.
Also, I'm available to do schedules for teams if you. I can put you in a situation.
Leagues. I mean, I think you'd have to get up to the league level, but well, why don't we segue into this season? We're starting off with a number of planets that are retrograde. So Venus is going to be direct by the time kickoff starts, but Uranus is now retrograde. And when does Jupiter go retrograde, Mark?
So what we got coming up is September 3rd, Venus goes direct. 24 hours later, Jupiter goes retrograde.
So a switch off there. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're almost exactly square. I think they're both at 15 degrees of Leo and Taurus, and they change within 24 hours of each other.
So real quick, Mark, for the layman, what would that mean in basic terms, what you just said?
So Mercury all the way through Pluto, all the outer planets past the luminaries will go retrograde every so often. depending on the planet. Mercury goes retrograde 3 to 4 times a year.
Okay.
So when a planet is changing direction or changing motion, it'll start slowing down around a week beforehand, and then it takes about a week afterwards to speed back up. So whenever there's a planetary station, it's stationing to change direction, that planet is highlighted more than it normally is for at least a week on either side. So Venus, so the cliche is that Venus is love and relationships, but that's just like one facet of it. Kind of the bottom line of Venus is your values, your morals, things that are personally important to you, like creature comforts, things you like to surround yourself with. And like love and relationships, just like one facet of that. So with Venus retrograde, it's kind of a going back over or reanalyzing or reprioritizing like what's important to you and what your values are. And so with it going retrograde, it's been introverted. And so then it'll be more extroverted after September 3rd. And Jupiter is kind of doing the opposite. Jupiter's been direct in the sign of Taurus, which is finances. So Jupiter's going to go retrograde on September 4th. And so that kind of, Jupiter's also like the big picture planet. Like if you go back through any year in history and just look at what Jupiter's in a sign for about a year, if you look at what sign Jupiter's in, then that will kind of show what's big in music, movies, arts, that kind of stuff for that year. So with Jupiter, so with both of them stationing at the same time, and in fact, the full moon's happening right within half an hour when we're recording this. But we just had a Uranus station a couple days ago. So we actually have 3 planets that are not completely stationary, but they're all moving at super slow speed at the same time.
Wow.
So
when you
there's
said
just an overwhelming amount of
so it's crazy. It's like when you said finances in the introverted version of that, to me that means gambling, and a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money on NFL kickoff weekend. Is that safe to say?
That is accurate. That is accurate. And if you look like historically, that first weekend's always crazy anyways. The one that I really remember the most is 1998 or something, when the Vikings had Dante Culpepper and Randy Moss.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I remember they lost to Carolina in week 1. Like Carolina had Nick Goings and
this really relates to what we've been talking about.
That's a blast from the past right there.
He's from about just a couple minutes from me. He's from Dublin, Ohio.
Oh wow.
But Carolina upset Minnesota in week 1, and then Carolina lost their next 15 games, and Minnesota won their next 15.
So that was when Seifert was the coach, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
George Seifert's an Aquarian, by the way. So let's talk about that. So the maybe we could kind of like sculpt a betting model here, because if people are going to lose their ass, what are they going to vote? What are they going to bet on? They're going to bet on their home team, right? So if we know that big money is going either on the home team or their home team, right? Is there a way for us to figure out what the other team is that is going to be easy money? Like figure out how to bet with the house money on this. Do you know what I mean? If we can figure out where all the enthusiasm and the loyalty is going, and if they're going to lose big, then it would behoove somebody to go in the other direction.
Right. So, and like gambling or game charts, I think the moon is supposed to rule the betting public.
Yeah.
So you can look at the moon in a game chart, and that should give you some idea of And again, I do all these signatures and stuff, looking at not just players, but like teams and stuff like that. I just get to, and that's why I make these signatures that are kind of shortcuts, because it can get tedious to have to like type in every single game's data and then look at the players and the teams and everything. Again, if I had a staff,
So
I could keep a lot of people busy.
is the moon going to be in Aries on Monday night?
This coming Monday, it will be in Taurus.
Of course.
So it'll be, yeah. And actually Jupiter goes retrograde Monday morning. There's a Moon Jupiter conjunction in Taurus on Monday. But yeah, the moon will be in Taurus when this shows.
So it's just interesting that like the first 4 episodes of the show, we've been talking a little bit about gambling, but to me, it looks like, the kickoff weekend is going to be the biggest weekend of gambling ever. And I'm talking about ever, just because it's so easy and it's legal in so many states now.
Yeah. They flooded the market with all, like every FanDuel, DraftKings, all of them have a bookie site now to where you can bet on stuff. And I kind of, where people lose all the money, I think, is doing the parlays.
Yeah, because they have a huge upside, and it's just kind of like you think it's going to hit, but you probably just lost $50 because you want to make 15,000 because that number gets you excited. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's always, if he had just made that fucking field goal, I would have gotten my 5th team in the parlay. Right? It always comes down to that.
Yeah. So here's my free gambling tip: is like I'd only do half points, like those ones where it's like a 3-point spread or a 1-point spread or whatever. Those are the ones that'll kill you, because they'll blow up your entire parlay. If you hit like 6 games and then the 7th one ends up a wash, a scratch, then so I tend to try and look at stuff that only have like 3.5 or 5.5 or whatever, so that you don't get all the games right and then lose it because one ends up like a scratch.
So kickoff is Thursday night, the 7th, right? Lions, Chiefs.
Yeah. So I've got a chart here for, I ran it for let's see if this will work. This is for I ran it for the Sunday games, that first Sunday, September 10th. I just ran it for Cleveland. So there's kind of your lineup for the Sunday kickoff for the first Sunday.
What does this mean to you?
Scorpio
like,
on the ascendant, huh?
Yeah. So Scorpio on the ascendant can be blowouts or upsets. Scorpio's power issues, power struggles. So you'll see some upsets, and then you see a lot of other games that are just they can be blowouts. And it's just to start the season there. There's that Jupiter and Uranus don't meet up until April 27th of next year, exact.
Yeah.
But they're I think what's the word? Co-present, I think, is the phrase that people use now. But they're co-present, they're within 8 degrees of each other in Taurus. And then there's a Sun Mercury conjunction in Virgo also. And then Pluto is going to be in the last 2 degrees of Scorpio or of Capricorn the entire season. So that's going to be the main theme for this season. And what I looked at was like teams and players that have like stuff in the second half of Earth signs, because the outer planets move a lot slower. So especially like Jupiter and Uranus. So teams with the middle degrees of Earth signs are gonna should do well this year. Uranus is big plays, exciting plays, defense, because Uranus is about disruption. So Uranus kind of rules defense. Then Jupiter is expansion and high scoring. And then, so for this first week, like Jupiter's going to be almost exactly trine the sun in Virgo, and it's Mercury in Virgo also there. So any teams or players with planets in that, 9 to 17 degrees of Earth signs are going to have a heads up.
So my take on this, Mark, and you can chime in here. Teams that when I see this, teams that kind of know who they are, have a system in place, understand what they're doing. This is a good weekend for them, right?
Yeah. And also too, even though it's out of sign, there's a Moon Pluto opposition there.
Yeah.
So that's the teams with stuff at 0 degrees of like fixed signs. Those are the ones that would be maybe potential upset victims.
I would say the theme here is bet the favorites in this weekend. I would not go with upsets. What do you think?
Yeah, for the most part, there's a couple interesting ones because of quarterback issues,
Right.
like kind of lingering issues that they're being shady about.
Like Joe Burrow.
Yeah. So this game here would be a perfect example of that. I mean, the Bengals are as good as anybody, but they're slow starters. Even with, because they lost the first 2 games last year, I think. His first game against Pittsburgh, his first year, I think. And then even in like the playoff games, they tend to start slow and then build later. So Deshaun Watson's a guy we can maybe talk about later. That's an interesting chart with some interesting transits this year.
Do you think we could talk about him now? He was terrible last year.
I think he sucks.
He was terrible, and I knew he was not going to be good. And here, this is just a football take on Deshaun Watson. This is not an astrological take, which we can get into. But I used to have him very early on in his career on my fantasy teams. And I'd like to stack him with either Hopkins or Will Fuller. And for a while, Will Fuller was just freaking dynamite. What I noticed about Deshaun Watson is that he was just horrible throwing on timing. Like he could not throw a timing play to save his life. If he ran around and scrambled and Hopkins or Fuller could get past the secondary, he was really good at finding them downfield. But from a football perspective, and I know he's a Virgo, but from a football perspective, I just thought his inability to throw consistently on time was going to be the thing that would keep him from going to the next level. What do you see for him in terms of his chart and the transits for this year? Are we looking at a comeback for Deshaun Watson, or is he going to get blown out?
So normally I don't like guys that have been around a few years and then have a year and a half off. That tends to be bad. So the first interesting thing about him is his birthday is 9/11. Oh no, it's 9/14.
Ed Reed is 9/11.
Ed Reed is 9/11. So normally, while I don't really like players coming off, those long layoffs and stuff, he's got Pluto at 28 Scorpio. So transiting Pluto will be forming a sextile to his Pluto the entire season. And really, Uranus is one of the big things I look at, because that's like big, surprising plays and unexpected outcomes. So Uranus travels between 19 and 22 Taurus during this season. And these are untimed charts, so his moon may be a little bit off from that 27, but it's within 6 degrees either way. But transiting Uranus in Taurus will complete a grand trine in Earth signs in his chart that'll last this entire season. It'll be trine his Neptune, and it'll be trine his Sun. And so the bad thing about being a celebrity right now is you do something bad the second it happens. The benefit, the good part of it is somebody even dumber than you is going to screw up 2 minutes later, and then you. So like Deshaun Watson is kind of an afterthought, kind of at this point, because he was not nearly as good as Jacoby Brissett last year. I mean, he just wasn't. Jacoby Brissett was way better. But Uranus completing his Earth grand trine, and Uranus might even be exact on his moon if this is off a few degrees. So, but that's a really powerful alignment. And two, Jupiter's going to be between 5 and 15 degrees of Taurus the whole season, because it retrogrades and then goes direct again. So he's going to have a loose trine from Jupiter to his Sun. And so that's one thing I figured out with all this is you can look at one specific transit, but really the guys that have these motors in their chart where it's like a multi-planet lineup, when those get aspected, that's when like they really have like the breakout, crazy seasons and stuff. So he may actually be able to right the ship, so to say. The only thing I don't like is the transiting south node will be on this Mercury, which can be some maybe additional stuff out of his past coming up.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
But,
like he's found some new Instagram masseuses in the Cleveland area.
yeah. So I've learned to try and pick out those bigger configurations where if it's hitting, multiple planets in a team or player's chart, then you can really get the big. And he's got Nick Chubb with him, who's just a beast. So that can really take a lot of the pressure, keep the pressure off of him. And he's got a pretty good receiving core at this point. So
Yeah. So
Well,
if he has a good
coach.
season.
He's a good coach.
Yeah. So Rob, if
Yeah.
he has a good season, we have to take this clip and be like, wow, it was predicted on Serious Sports with our friend Mark here. Because
Absolutely.
I didn't see that coming. I didn't see him having a good season coming, but I hope you're right now that you've said it. But I really, really want to know, because I think the biggest narrative going into the season, in my view, is the New York Jets and Aaron Rodgers. Can we get into Aaron Rodgers' chart and what your impression of it here in New York, which is much different than Wisconsin?
yeah, so he's he's kind of a mixed bag this year.
Okay.
So there's 6 planets in Sagittarius here.
Yep.
So Saturn's at the low degrees of Pisces, but it's not really going to form an exact square to any of these. Neptune will be in the 22 to 24 area of Pisces. So that'll form some squares, but again, nothing exact. He does transiting Saturn will form a trine to his Pluto, and transiting Pluto, which will be at 28, 29 Capricorn most of the season, will be forming a trine to his Chiron. So he does have Saturn trine Pluto and Pluto trine Chiron. And this is something I picked up through this Magi Astrology, some website I'd run across. But like you don't normally see Chiron involved in like sports transits, like they just use like Sun, Mars, Jupiter. But I found like that Chiron really those are like special times where you can do things you've never been able to do before, or have like, immaculate games, that kind of thing. So
Chiron is also body parts, right? I mean, depending on what sign it's in, if you're dealing with Chiron in Capricorn, those are knee issues, right? And when you have an hard aspect, transiting aspect to Chiron, you have to pay attention to that, especially in sports. Mark, what do you think? Personally, I think that this aspect for Rodgers is interesting. But what do you think of what is essentially his Mars return at the beginning of the season, which takes it back 2 years ago to the 2021 season, which was, I think, wasn't he the MVP in 2021?
I believe so. That was the year Devontae Adams really went like just berserk. I think the first year he went berserk.
So he's going through his Mars return on opening weekend.
Yeah, it's right there. So Mars is your energy, aggression, instinctual behavior, and also in like sports charts, like Mars rules like scoring. So when you have a Mars, everybody has a Mars return every 2 years. So having a Mars return kind of starts a new 2-year energetic cycle. So
he can be re-energized by being in New York.
Yeah, and he's got a new set of weapons to play with that are pretty impressive. Although I do not like them to win their division. There's a sleeper team that I like a little bit better in that division, but I think
Who is
definitely the Dolphins.
Okay.
They have this immaculate let's see if I can. I'll take that off screen share for 1 second.
Okay.
Bring this up. So this, I just stumbled across this today.
Yeah.
It was a Pisces, right?
And so Florida is a Pisces state.
Yep.
So then we have here, I'll show you. What's the coach's name? Mike. It's the dude from the 49ers.
Mike McDaniel.
McDaniel, there we go. So I don't want to hurt anybody's brain or anything. But okay.
So just briefly, you would say generally for Aaron Rodgers, it's a renewed energy this year, but he has to be careful about his knees.
Yeah, I'd say it's a renewed energy.
Yeah.
He's got some great weapons. I felt that there was a weirdness between him and Matt LaFleur.
Okay.
To me, it kind of like Matt LaFleur is probably a good coach, but also like we're gonna find out this year if he can get Jordan Love to perform.
Well, I think Matt LaFleur will actually get to be a coach versus Aaron Rodgers and casting a giant shadow over that organization.
Yeah.
So in terms of the hierarchy, he now is elevated above Jordan Love in the hierarchy. So he has more authority, more power. He may have more theoretical command in game situations and not have to deal with Aaron Rodgers, who is kind of a handful.
Oh yeah, 6 planets in Sag and then 3 or 4 in Scorpio. Yeah, we know who was running that team.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So this is the kind of like we were talking about earlier on with the being at the right place at the right time. So we've got so I've got Tua Tagliaboa's chart, the Miami Dolphins chart, and McDaniel's chart, all kind of overlapped.
Okay.
So if you look at here, so the middle chart is Tua, the inner chart is McDaniel, outer chart is the Dolphins.
Okay.
So we're talking heavy conjunctions here.
So look at this Pisces stream.
Yeah.
So remembering that Saturn is travels between 0 and 6 degrees Pisces during the season, and Neptune travels between 24 and 26 degrees Pisces. So the Dolphins have a Chiron Saturn conjunction in their first game chart. And so then Tua's Mars is conjunct the Saturn of the Dolphins, and his Mercury is right there conjunct the Chiron and the Saturn of the Dolphins. And then McDaniel, it's not that tight with some of these, but McDaniel's sun is Mercury, so they have a mental connection to where Tua will listen to McDaniel and vice versa, because they have
that's almost telepathic.
Yes.
But
So when he's,
speaking of,
and I missed there too. Tua's got Sun at 12 Pisces also.
Okay.
So that's another Pisces. That's
Man,
6
he
Pisces
is really
planets.
he is like loaded with Pisces. Look at that. Midheaven, Jupiter, South Node, Sun, Mercury, and Mars. They should call him
So
Tuna.
if you
Tuna.
Yeah.
Tua.
Tuna.
But
Yo, speaking of Tua though, I think he's got to watch out for concussions this year. He had a big incident last year, right, where he was on the field, he couldn't move his hands. So is there anything that's in this chart or the outer charts that indicate injury for Tua if he doesn't watch out? Because that's what I'd be looking out for if I was a Dolphins fan.
Absolutely. So here's where kind of the tricky stuff comes in. When you're like looking at a player or team's chart, you can have really big energy that can make you really explosive, but it can also lead to injuries. And I kind of found this out a few years back in like fantasy football when I started looking at transiting Jupiter conjunct the sun of a play. I'm like, oh man, if I just look where Jupiter is and see when Jupiter is hitting us on somebody's sun.
I remember you and I talking about that. It was like Phillip Rivers, right?
And Andrew Luck was the other one.
Yeah.
And they both bombed the years Jupiter was on their sun, because it's sometimes that initial, like when a planet is like conjunct one of your planets, it can be too much energy. My horrible analogy is it's like trying to shove an entire watermelon down a garbage disposal. It's just too much energy, and like if you don't know it's coming, you don't know what to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it's large and expansive. Okay.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just too much energy for them to know what to do with. And also it can be, it can tend to laziness or being overly
confident.
Yeah, overly confident, too risky. And I think that one year, Phillip Rivers actually threw like a ton of interceptions that year. He had Jupiter conjunct his sun.
Yeah.
But this is kind of what I look for is like, cheat code number 27 or whatever. If you're doing fantasy football or whatever, like if a quarterback has a bunch of he's on a new team. It's a rookie quarterback, and you want to know which receiver he's going to like the best. You look at, is there a Mercury-Venus conjunction or trine or a Sun-Venus conjunction between the quarterback and any of those receivers? And that'll tell you who his favorite receiver is going to be, because there'll be
The
that
classic
mental
was Steve
connection
Young and
between
Jerry
them.
Rice. They
Yes.
were October 12th and 13th, right? Like they were so on point with each other with that conjunction. Getting back to the concussion question that Al brought up, and I'm going to kind of go into too a Saturn here in Aries, which is the head, right? And we have transiting Chiron around his Saturn again this year, but we also have McDaniel's Venus conjunct his Saturn, which I think is good for the relationship. But I also feel like he's going to be extra protective of Tua this season. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, no, I think that's accurate, because Chiron is the wounded healer, and Saturn is structures, and Saturn rules the body, it rules the skeleton, bones. So having Chiron conjunct Saturn can definitely sometimes lead to there being potential injuries. And there's another quarterback who has a similar Saturn that should have a blow up year, who's also a Pisces and who also has Chiron on his Saturn this year, and that's Justin Herbert for the Chargers.
My son would like to hear that. He drafted him in his fantasy team.
Yeah, I mean, the stars are lined up for that dude to go off. And Austin Eckler is not used up yet, even though with all the touches he's had. That would be, I'll tell you what, that would be a 1-2 combo to have. If you're
Eckler is such an interesting story. I mean, did he go to Western College or something like that? Like some really bizarre little anonymous school somewhere?
yeah, he did. And so I think, yeah. So when you have those really big explosive transits, they can go either way. And they can go both ways too. A guy can play great for 9 games and then get injured and be out for the rest of the year. Also, so you can get that kind of a deal to it. You know what? There's another. I didn't even see this. Yeah, Tua's got additional planets there in Pisces.
Yeah, I just went through him. He's got like the super stallion, man.
Yeah, that's great. And Justin Herbert too has a bunch of Pisces. He's a Pisces sun, has a bunch of Pisces planets also.
Herbert totally strikes me as a Pisces.
Yeah, super quiet, like just low key, like very calm.
Yeah, definitely. So
Mark, what about my New England Patriots this year? Is it going to be another down year?
So brief history, I'll keep this really short. So kind of how this works is, some people use the franchise charts for the team. I like the first game chart, like their first official game. So like how leagues are formed is different clubs will play, and then once there's enough, they'll form a league. So I have a list of things that list of twins. So a lot of times there will be like the Seahawks and the Buccaneers had their first game the first day, and at Jacksonville, Carolina. And then when you go back, there's other teams that have, I call them, they're twins together.
Okay.
So the Patriots have a twin.
Okay.
And if you think back a few years to a lot of the big playoff games, like Peyton Manning, the Patriots and Broncos are twins. Their first game was against each other, actually.
Okay.
So they have the same exact chart. So there's also a handful of other teams that started in 1960. There's like 9 teams that are still in the NFL that started in 1960.
Weren't the
So there's
Raiders in 1960?
Yep, it's the Bills, Jets, Raiders, Titans, Cowboys. And then you have the Chargers and Chiefs. The Chargers and Chiefs are exact twins. Their first game was against each other also. And then I think the Bills Jets first games were against each other.
Okay, now we have teams that have relocated, right? So the Raiders reincarnate a couple times, one in LA, then back in Oakland, and then in Las Vegas. So should we look at the Vegas chart for the Raiders now because they've gone through so many iterations?
I've literally spent hundreds of hours on this kind of stuff, down these rabbit holes.
Yeah.
I found that the initial chart is always in play.
It's still dominant.
Yeah, because like when you get into the NBA and like Major League Baseball, like some of those teams, like the NBA, I promise you, if you went a rabbit hole, you'll never get out of. Try to sort out the Charlotte Hornets, New Orleans Pelicans thing, because they like switched.
Yeah, they switched teams and locations between the Bobcats, the Pelicans, and the Hornets. So that's a tough one.
That was a nightmare to sort out. But there's several teams there in the bucket with the Patriots. They do not have, so the main thing for the Patriots is they have this big configuration that is obviously very beneficial because Raiders, Patriots, Broncos, I mean, there's tons of Super Bowls there. So,
okay, here we go.
Here we go. September 9th, 1960. And this was actually against the Broncos, was their first game. So for all those teams you mentioned, Titans, Raiders, Jets, Bills, Chargers, Chiefs, Denver, New England, Dallas, they all have the same outer planet lineup. They're like moons and Mercury are slightly different because even though they started the same year, some are a couple of days apart. But the main engine here is this Jupiter-Mars opposition. And then there's also Mercury at 26 Virgo. So this is a mutable T-square. Mercury, Jupiter, Mars. That's good. That's a really powerful thing.
This is almost like my chart, by the way.
Is it?
Yeah, I was born on the 22nd of September. So I have the Mars-Jupiter opposition, the T-square to the sun.
Then you're very close to the Dallas Cowboys chart because they were the latest date of that group of whatever, 8 or 9.
That's funny because that's your rival, right?
Well, so I have to confess, I hated the Cowboys, right? Especially in the 90s, man. But I have to not because I live in Texas. I have to, have a little disclosure here. I have a close friend whose son married into the Jones family. So I don't have a front row seat into the Jones family world. But, I get tidbits of information. And one of the things that has really struck me about the Cowboys is that it is a mom and pop business. Like, it's mind-blowing how they have essentially branched off with Jerry Jr., Steven, I forget the daughter's name, and then and they just run these verticals, right, in the organization. And then Stephen Jones Jr., who just graduated from the University of Arkansas, he's in the mix now. Like, this is a fucking mom and pop shop, and I actually really respect it. Right,
Cool.
It is a family business, and I've never really liked Jerry Jones, Libra, right, but I've come to respect the fact that they've built a mom and pop business into probably one of the top 3 sports franchises on the planet. And it's like when you see something like that, you got to give them some props.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's cool. I think they could use an astrologer though, the Jones family, if they don't already have one.
I think you're right.
They should.
Yeah.
I
They
think you're
should.
right. Yeah.
So as far as your Patriots,
Okay.
so
And when we get
transiting
this chance, Mac Jones specifically, because a lot of people are around here are saying if he doesn't do something this year, he's done. So I want to see what's going on with his chart. because
He's a
that's the vibe
Virgo
I've been
too,
getting.
right, Mark? He's a Virgo as well.
I believe so. I've got
Yeah.
his chart in here. So transiting Neptune is going to be around 22 to 24 Pisces during this season. I'm sorry, 24 to 26 Pisces. So it's kind of on the it'll be the outer degrees completing this. It would be completing a mutable grand square, throwing in the Neptune there. So that to me shows that there's, in fact, all the teams pretty much with this lineup that started in 1960 are kind of in transition one way or another. Denver's got a new coach. New England's still breaking in a new quarterback. The Jets have Aaron Rodgers now. The Raiders have moved, new coach. The Titans are in transition. Like the Bills and Chiefs are kind of the only two, well, in Dallas are kind of the only stable ones, like in that group. So my what I kind of worked out is probably like right around 5. I mean, they're never going to stink with Belichick, right? I mean, they're never going to stink. My guess is they're around 500 or somewhere in that 8 and 9, 9 and 8 area. I would think that Mac Jones will keep improving a little bit, but we can pull his chart up here. But there's not a lot of like really good aspects that are tight. They do have Jupiter trying their north node. So there will be, and I'm thinking like next season, like Jupiter gets into Gemini and it'll be conjunct their Mars. It's like there may be some more development next year, but that division is so what I've got.
Isn't
got the AFC East
Belichick's son conjunct the ascendant here?
It's very close. Belichick is April 16th, which is the same birthday as my sister. So I think
he's what, around 20, 23?
He's somewhere in that 23, 24 area. So he's in their first house anyways.
Well, that makes
His son is in their first house. And two, so obviously the most successful coach in Patriots history. So if you look, his son then it's going to be in the 20ish degrees of fire. That completes a fire grand trine in their chart. His son is trying their Jupiter. Jupiter's trying Uranus. Uranus trying his son. So again, when you find these planets or these players who have something that completes a bigger configuration in a team or city's chart, that's when you know you're onto something. So I mean, a Uranus Jupiter square itself is like super powerful. But then when your coach's son completes that, and then Brady was a Leo.
That's right. Yeah.
And so you had Brady in there. I think he had something in the mid to late 20s of Leo.
And he had Saturn,
Yeah.
the Sun Saturn conjunction.
Yeah. So he fit in there. So then when you get multiple, so I'll tell you, the first place I found this was the 99 Rams, the the greatest show on turf because they had a water grand trine between Marshall Falk, who was Pisces, Isaac Bruce, who was Scorpio, and then before Kurt Warner, they had brought in Trent Green, who was a Cancer. He gets injured in the preseason. He's replaced with Kurt Warner, who's also a Cancer. And then the funny thing is, all three of those guys had Mars in Capricorn.
Oh wow!
Warner, Isaac Bruce, and Marshall Falk, all three had Mars in Capricorn.
What sign was Vermeil?
Scorpio.
Scorpio.
So-
So he gets
So
right
again,
into the
his
water.
son fit right into that water grand trine.
Then Mike Martz is a Taurus, right?
I forget, he's Taurus or Leo.
He's Taurus.
So there was some little bit of it was a little bit too much. As much as I liked him, there's a little bit too much ego there. I think he kind of
I like Mike Martz. I know he's arrogant, but
yeah, he's literally insane.
yeah. Let's see
So
Mac
we
Jones. I got to remember this. Let's see Mac Jones's chart. Maybe you could do a Can you do a synastry chart with the Patriots and Mac Jones?
Yep.
Let's give Al Dawg a bone.
Give the Al Dog a bone.
Yeah, I mean, I'm traditionally a Pats fan, but I gotta be honest, I'm rooting for the Jets this year just because, I did put a little bit of money on the Jets to win. Nothing too substantial, but that's kind of my team this year. More so than the Patriots.
Let me Mercury retrograde our conversation a little bit.
Okay.
Let's go back while Mark gets that together. Let's
Yeah.
go back and talk about the Colorado Buffaloes. I
Okay.
think you could do a prop bet on them to possibly make it to the Power 4 game.
Okay. I mean, I think you're right. And I've done similar. I've placed a few bets. Okay. I want them to win or at least make an appearance in the Pac-12 championship game, which I think is doable. But this weekend, Saturday, I also bet on them to beat TCU in an upset. And I think I'm feeling pretty good about it, but if not, oh well. But yeah, this year, the Colorado Buffaloes and the New York Jets. I also like the Texas Longhorns and maybe the Seahawks as a surprise team in the NFC. But that's who I have my eyes on as far as narrative goes. But yeah. Deion Sanders, he's going to have a big year. Win or lose, it's going to be big because the whole spotlight's on him. Not all of it, but a lot.
Deion Sanders flushed his team and just sucked in all these portal players.
Yeah. He recruited 50 new players, and they're all really good. Like they're from Alabama, they're from Florida State.
Right. So
they're
if
from
he does,
Houston.
if he is successful,
Yeah.
it's going to change college football forever.
Yeah. Because they were 1-11 last year.
You're just going to see coach.
Head coach.
But not everybody can do that, though, right? Like, because Deion, his enthusiasm is contagious,
Big time.
and he can get people to believe in themselves.
Big time. He's probably one of the better public speakers I've seen because I've been watching his vlogs and the speeches that he gives his team. He's recruited the last two top cornerbacks in the country in Travis Hunter and Cormani McClain. And I think he's going to continue to do that. He's going to continue to get the best cornerbacks in the country every year. And he's going to get guys to transfer. So college football has changed significantly. And he is probably the best symbol of that currently right now. And he's heading into a big week coming up. So I got my eyes on Deion for sure.
He just better hope those blood clots don't catch up with him.
He's walking now. He had his foot surgery and whatever, but he's walking now. He's like he's typically on a golf cart on the practice field, but he is walking again. He's hobbling a little bit, but yeah.
I think we know why they're showing up. It's the unspoken the unspoken ailments.
Could be. He claims it's hereditary, but there could be other factors as well.
All right, Mark, you got some Mac Jones Patriots for us?
Got it.
So Mac's on the inside.
Yeah, Mac's on the inside. So
Okay.
so how about his Mercury is right on the Uranus of the Patriots, and his North Node is kind of loosely conjunct his Pluto.
He was born on a
Patriots
lunar
Pluto.
eclipse.
Yeah. Yep. Sun 17. Oh, yeah. Sun 12 Virgo, Moon. And again, uh, the time is correct for the Patriots chart, but time is just set at noon for Mac Jones, so it can be. But yeah, there would have been a lunar eclipse that day.
Huh.
That
That's got to be kind of weird, right? Because look, there's all these vagaries with the moon, and like he was up at Alabama, kind of up first season, and then down. And prior to that, last season at Alabama, who was he? Where was he? Right? That's Mark. Don't you think that's really lunar, like that, just like flashing really quickly?
so yeah, so when you look at guys that are kind of have that sun or moon in Pisces, a lot of times they're either really good leaders or they lead from behind, or sometimes they can be kind of standoffish. Um, so like he's got that moon in Pisces. If as long as he wasn't born, something radically, 2 a.m. that day or something, then he's got moon in Pisces. But transiting Saturn is going to be between 0 and 6 degrees Pisces during this season. So Saturn conjunct your moon can be kind of depressing or not feeling good, but it's also where you can make learn the most lessons, make the biggest. If he's willing to do the work, he can make gigantic strides this year. Because that Saturn conjunct your moon, makes you want to get down to business and straighten things out and fix things.
That's so funny.
So
We just closed on a house today with the Moon Saturn conjunction.
Congrats.
Very good.
Nice.
Oh, on the full moon, day after
Yeah.
Uranus station,
Yeah.
or a day and a half after.
Yeah.
No, it's a good time to be getting set up where you need to be with what's coming.
I kind of felt that.
Oh, that's another show, isn't it?
That's serious life versus serious sports.
Yeah. Oh man.
So the alignment here isn't too bad. He's got that Mars and Leo. That I think he's born around the same time as Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy has Mars and Leo as well. And does he have any aspects in Aries? No.
So yeah, that Chiron's not really hitting anything.
What do you
Jupiter,
think is
Jupiter will be trying his sun
yeah.
during a good part of this season.
Okay. What do you think his relationship is with Belichick based on some of these astrological signs in these charts?
Yeah, I'd say in general, Belichick likes him, because I know Bill's got some, and we can even, we can even do that.
Let's give it the Dolphins to
Well, yeah,
annual effect.
Yeah. This is pretty interesting stuff. I've never seen these charts, in this circle within circle type of pattern. Because I'm intro to astrology, Mark. I'm sort of learning as I go. I'm having a very public like astrological education, but it's
Now
fun.
your humility is inspiring.
And I'd say that, sports are probably the best way to learn astrology, in my view.
absolutely. So the inner chart is the Patriots, the middle chart is Mac Jones, and the outer chart is Bill.
Bill Belichick. So he's 26.
So Bill's Mars is exactly conjunct Mac Jones's Chiron.
Ooh.
So again, that's any kind of Chiron thing is going to be a wounded healer type thing. So Bill is able to reach him and help him if Mac is up to it. North node conjunct south. So this would be the problematic thing is Bill seems to be going one direction. Or yeah, that's a conjunction there. So there may be, whereas when there's a nodal opposition, which Bill's north node is opposite to Mac Jones' north node, but there is a moon north node conjunction. So there's contact there. There's some connection there.
You can really see the long-term relationship with the Patriots with that Venus-Saturn conjunction.
Yeah. So Patriots had not won a Super Bowl until Belichick got there. So look, his north node is conjunct to Chiron within a degree. The Chiron in the Patriots chart is a conjunction to Belichick's north node. So that's showing he's the one that led that franchise. He was the one that healed them.
Interesting.
What else is good?
So, Mark, you like the
So
Dolphins?
there's a Venus South Node conjunction between Mac and Belichick, which shows a past life connection, that kind of a thing. And also there's a Venus Mercury conjunction for Mac Jones, conjunct the South Node for Belichick.
Interesting.
Yep, sorry.
So,
What'd you
Mark,
have
when
to
we get
say?
a chance, I want to know who you like in the NFC. You mentioned the Dolphins in the AFC, but is there a particular team you like in the NFC?
So here's kind of the Chiefs and Chargers and the AFC both have really good charts.
Okay.
Miami's looks very strong. Cincinnati looks the strongest in the AFC.
Wow.
But as we've seen the last 2 years in the playoffs, that Cincinnati's only problem is transiting Pluto is in their 12th house.
Yeah.
So if you go look at their 3 playoff losses with Joe Burrow, there seems to be a hidden hand at play in at least some of those.
Yeah.
And at least some of those playoff losses.
Okay.
So my pick would be the Bengals
Okay.
if the officials are even up.
Okay. In the AFC. Okay.
I don't think the NFL likes smaller market teams in the Super Bowl. That's my that's my take on it.
But
Okay.
this is a serious question, though. Is Kansas City that big of a market?
So there's a couple. No,
Well,
they're
what's
not,
interesting
but-
is since the Rams left, their market has sort of expanded, right? Sort of to all that whole area in a sense, because there's no team in St. Louis anymore. So it's not that big. It's not like New York or LA, but it's gotten bigger recently.
Yeah, and I think winning brings in more fans also.
Mark's a big Rams fan, by the way. Mark, have you noticed Ram fans changing their alliance to the Chiefs?
I know everyone in St. Louis is pretty pissed off, but so here's your minutia. Here's your minute trivia that most people don't know is the first Cleveland NFL team was actually the Rams. The Rams were the first Cleveland team. They played there for 1 year and then moved to Los Angeles.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's so when people talk about the Rams moving to St. Louis and then leaving, it's like, well, they were in LA before that, but long before that, they were in Cleveland.
Yeah. So generally, though, what's happened with those St. Louis Rams fans? Did they start becoming LA Rams fans, or did they sort of go to the Chiefs, or did they stop caring?
I don't. If they were not Rams fans before they moved to St. Louis, they absolutely jumped off that bandwagon.
Okay.
I think the NFL is enamored with Patrick Mahomes.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter the size of the market. I mean, he meets all their criteria for what their star for the 21st century looks like, including the weird gay brother.
Yeah. He checks all the boxes.
Oh, isn't that diverse? He's got a weird gay brother. Isn't that great?
Yeah. But no, his brother's off the hook.
That's one way of putting it. It's just so weird how the genetics are distributed across a family like that, right? I mean, Patrick Mahomes gets all of his dad's, preternatural baseball talent. It's clear that, he likes chicks. And then the brother gets none of it, none of the talent. He likes to do dances on TikTok and the diva. It's just weird how DNA is distributed like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'd almost be interesting to look at the two Mahomes brothers charts together, but I don't have Pat's brothers chart there. I do want to point out, I think obviously be good. I think Jets, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Jacksonville will also be there in the running for.
Let's go. Okay.
For in the AFC, at least for the playoff spots. For the NFC, I mean, to me, so the 49ers have, I think, easily the best set of transits for this year. I think it's so me and Roberts, our favorite teams are arch rivals.
Okay.
Yeah, we're born on exact opposite days of the year.
Yeah. But I have to say that it's obvious that somebody in the NFL doesn't like the 49ers at this point, because between that the Ray Lewis Super Bowl, the second one where Baltimore beat San Francisco, and then the sham of the NFC Championship game last year. I mean, there's so like, I don't have all of this perfect. I have I can look at my signatures in a game chart, and usually I can be pretty accurate.
Yeah.
But there's still variables, and I don't have the times of birth.
The hidden hand, as you say. The hidden hand can throw a flag for sure on pass interference, on holding, can really change a game.
Yeah. So I'll be wrong on stuff sometimes. Times when you look at the like, it's obvious. It is very clear which team should win the game. That 49ers Eagles NFC Championship game, that was a screw job. That was, I mean, the officials determined that the Eagles were going to go up 2 scores before anything else happened.
It changed the game plan.
And there was no gray area in the astrology. The astrology was crystalline clear on who was going to win that game. And then the 49ers played two and a half quarters without a quarterback that can even throw a pass.
Well, so to your point, it changed the game plan, which meant that Brock Purdy was going to have to throw more. And so they were trying to set up to get kind of back into this thing. They set up, and the play was going to break, right? But the tight ends missed the block, and that's when the ulnar joint popped, right? He caught him right as he was throwing. And to your point, Mark, if those other plays don't happen, I don't think they're calling that play at that point in the game.
Right. I mean, I think there's a couple bogus pass interferences early in the game, and then they were bound and determined that Philadelphia was going to be up early, big in that game.
So I think the 49ers, they're loaded. And you think that there's some interesting action around the chart. What are some other teams in the NFC that you like?
So I think the Lions will be good. The Lions have some very nice transits. I don't know if they'll quite reach the hype they're getting. And also I don't understand why this team is so undercounted. But the Vikings just offensively, their defense is crap, but offensively and like Astro wise, you're gonna have a hard time. They just added Jordan Addison to Justin Jefferson, and Alexander Madison is, the same as Dalvin Cook. They perform exactly the same.
They'll probably stay healthy longer.
Yeah. So offensively, I think Minnesota's going to be there. I think the big question in the NFC is, I think Dallas will be good. I don't know how much losing their offensive coordinator will help them, will hurt them. My guess that the Chargers will be very happy that they took Dallas's offensive coordinator, because I think Herbert's really gonna go into the stratosphere now that they have.
So is Mike McCarthy calling plays now?
I believe that's what's happening. But
he's actually not a bad play caller.
Yeah. But I think the Chargers would have won 12 or 13 games every year that Herbert's been there if their coach, if Staley wasn't constantly just doing insane stuff.
Yeah, where's Mars and Uranus in his chart?
Yeah, we'll have to pull that up. We'll pull him up here. So to me, the question is the Eagles. Traditionally, I don't like teams coming off of a Super Bowl loss.
Right.
Only 3 teams in history have lost the Super Bowl and then won it the next year. It was the Dolphins and Cowboys back to back, and Super Bowl 5 and 6 or 6 and 7 or whatever, and then the Patriots a few years ago. But so there's a lot of teams that made the playoffs and stuff the following year, but they're usually out the first game. There's usually this hangover from losing the Super Bowl. And Jalen Hurts has some of those injury, potential injury type transit things in there.
He's a Leo, right?
You know what? I don't remember.
I think he's a Leo.
Yeah. Mark, quick question.
Yeah.
In your studies of the NFL, have you noticed an overrepresentation of Leos?
So that's it kind of changes. I found that the earth signs are pretty predominant, and it kind of goes by position too.
Okay.
Like running backs, you'll see the bigger guys will be earth signs, or else Sagittarius. And then it seemed like a lot of the good cornerbacks and defensive play and quarterbacks will be Leo. But a funny change that's happened is if you go back the 70s, 80s, quarterbacks were always Mercury signs. It was all Gemini and Virgo, all of them. Bradshaw, Namath.
Yeah.
like all the big quarterbacks were Montana. They were all Gemini or Virgo for the most part. Traditionally, Pisces are not good quarterbacks for the most part. That
That's
clouded
interesting.
thinking. Yeah, so
Because
there's
it kind of shows how the game's changed a little bit. It used to be more sort of cerebral for the quarterback anyways, but now it's more a little bit more run and gun. You see a lot of shorter, faster quarterbacks who sort of improvise.
Yeah, it's much more the athlete, the guys who can make a play well as passing and stuff. So yeah, it's definitely changed a lot. I think
I don't know how long that's going to last. I mean, Kyler Murray, if you look at the league as a copycat league, he's a cautionary tale, I think, for that style of quarterback.
I think he's out of there after this. He does not have good chances for this year. And I think
He should have played baseball. Sorry.
Yeah, his coach was his biggest supporter, I think.
Yeah.
So I think Dallas will be really good. The Eagles should be really good, barring injuries to Hurts or something. So there are two kind of interesting teams. And so like the NFC South is kind of trash now. They got Baker Mayfield, so Derek Carr is pretty good.
Yeah.
But then you got a rookie and a second-year player. But if you look at the schedules, New Orleans has pretty good Astro for their chart this year. And Carr does not have to play great. He's got really good receivers and a good stash of running backs there. If Carr could just make the basic throws and not throw interceptions, the team who's got a really good chart and like logically my brain doesn't think this, but Astro wise, like the Falcons.
I think the Falcons are a team to watch out for. Their coach is excellent.
And if you look at the so I think that the two duds are the NFC South. The NFC North, I think, is a little bit weaker, and then the AFC South. So the AFC South plays the NFC South this year in the cross-conference games. So, you look at Atlanta, New Orleans, Jacksonville, those three, if there's just some decent play, like can rack up a lot of wins very easily because of those cross-conference games. They can really, you're playing against a lot of rookie quarterbacks or teams that are in transition. So like, over under win totals, like I would look hard at like the Saints and the Falcons. And if one of those, or even, Carolina, even if what's his face that they drafted from Alabama, whether Bryce Young. Yeah. So if any of those Young, Carr, Ritter, if any of those quarterbacks like really hit it running, like that could be one of those teams could really get like a lot of wins because there's a lot of like easy cherry pick games in there.
So what about the true node in Aries and quarterback like Baker Mayfield? Do you think that could impact him? I know we're talking about like 2-season transit. I think he's a really early Aries, if I'm not mistaken. But how do you think that'll impact Baker Mayfield's career? Could he revive himself here in Tampa with that true node transit?
So it's funny. I was kind of thinking a little bit about that earlier from the Todd Bowles point of view. I mean, I think Todd Bowles is a solid coach. I mean, I think I think he knows his stuff, but he just seems to always like land in places that they know they're about to do a rebuild.
Right.
And it
Well, he had a
was
pretty good run with the Jets. Wasn't he there for like 3 or 4 seasons?
he was, and I think they got rid of him a little bit too early.
I agree.
They kept running through quarterbacks and stuff. It's like when you have no consistency, it's hard to. It's like Baker's chart here. There's a lot of fire.
Oh, he's
So,
going to have the true node on his son Mercury at the beginning of the season, right?
yeah, but it's going to pass really quick off that. And then Jupiter will be square his Mars. Again, what I like to see for this season is a lot of Earth. There's a little bit there. Uranus, transiting Uranus in Taurus will be trying this Chiron. And then starting to form a trine to his Neptune, but it's kind of loose. It's like he might do okay, but it just feels he needs some young wide receivers there. I mean, Godwin and Evans are great, but neither one of them are ever healthy. I just think he's starting again, but he's just kind of in a bad situation. I would see the next year, if he can stick around the league, the year after that, I think looks better. Because then we get an exact trine from Uranus to his Neptune. He'll be coming up on his Saturn return.
Saturn return for Baker Mayfield. Wow.
Yeah, so he's kind of been one of those in between years that it doesn't look awesome, doesn't look horrible, but too we get into next season and he's got transiting Pluto be conjunct his Uranus, which will be either he blows it up and has his best year, or else he'll be out of the league.
Yeah.
So that'll be his make or break.
Yeah.
That's too big of a transit to.
He's born on a full moon too, right? He's got the moon in the.
Yep. Yep.
I think he's likable. I've always liked Baker.
I do too. I do too.
I like his fiery persona. I mean, when he played in Cleveland, I mean, he threw some passes that, let's say if I'm on the first floor, he was missing on the second floor or the basement. He threw some passes that I was I don't know where he's going with that. It was just wildly inaccurate for a time period, but I like his fiery nature. I like his leadership. I think, he's a bit of a nutcase. You've seen him headbutt people while they have their helmet on and he doesn't.
Yeah. That's an Aries thing.
That's very Aries. Yeah. That's the most Aries thing I've ever seen in my life, really. So,
okay. The Browns did him dirty.
Do you think so?
He played. I mean, he got them their first playoff win in 87 years or whatever, and then they should have beat the Chiefs that next year, or that next playoff round. I mean, they gave the Chiefs everything they could handle, and then he played the whole next season injured, and then they started the Deshaun Watson stuff. I mean, obviously Cleveland, regardless of how Deshaun Watson plays, they obviously gave up way too much.
So here's my question: Did Freddie Kitchens have a picture of Jimmy Haslam blowing Myles Garrett? Is that how he got that job?
I mean, you would some of these teams just end up in Haslam's just not a good owner. I mean, he spends the money and everything, which is great, but he just will not they had a really good coach. Eric Mangini, they really played well under him and were building every year. And it's they put somebody in there and they give them 1 year less than they should. And so they just end up being this revolving door and nobody ever gets their feet on the ground.
The man genius.
Yeah.
Okay, you got to indulge me here now. Little Brock Purdy chart. Let's look at little Brock Purdy.
Let's see, I'll pull up the 49ers also. See what. Well, here we'll just do the threesome. Well, that didn't
Purdy,
sound
Shanahan,
right.
and Niners.
Yeah.
All right, good. Shanahan's got a wacky chart, man. He's got all that squares, those squares with Sagittarius and Virgo in his chart.
Yeah. I mean, you could make the argument that San Fran's been probably the most consistent team within the last 5 years, considering how many NFC championship games they've been to, you know? So
Yeah.
I like that guy Bosa. He's a favorite of mine.
Nick's a
on the-
killer.
Yeah, big time.
Apparently, his
How do the West
grandfather
Coast
was,
fans?
his
do they-
grandfather was some kind of mob enforcer or something. Like
Oh wow. Wow.
his grandfather killed dudes.
I believe it. He's from Jersey, right?
I think he's from Florida.
Huh.
So this is the 49ers are the inside chart. Brock's the middle, and Shanahan's the outside.
Okay.
Wow.
Sorry, guys.
You're right. He was from Florida.
What's that?
He is from Florida, Bosa.
Yeah. So, by the way, they do have gangsters in Florida too.
Yeah.
So, his moon is conjunct the 49ers sun.
Yes. And
Wow.
Shanahan's Jupiter. So
Wow.
right there's a stellar. And in fact, Shanahan's Jupiter is exactly conjunct to Mercury, the 49ers. I mean, within 5 minutes.
Wow. You see all the Virgo Shanahan has, and then he's got the Sagittarius. It's like this weirdly like passive aggressive thing in his chart, I think. Right? Like he's smarter than everybody else with Sagittarius. He's got this weird thing going on with. What do you think about like the Sagittarius Virgo stuff there, Mark?
So I think that's one of those squares that are probably really weird to deal with.
Yeah.
Because you've got the Puritan and the Bohemian. So it's like it's kind of like, do they just agitate themselves, or do they use the Virgo to kind of ground the Sagittarius energy? Is kind of so this is he's got a Sun Saturn square, so I know those are difficult. So as much as he probably rides everyone else, he's probably equally as difficult on himself. Sun Saturn squares, Sun Saturn anything, or probably even a trine probably isn't even that pleasant. And I have a Sun Saturn conjunction, so I'm speaking from.
It's really Virgo is such a control freak, I think, here, right? And then Sagittarius tends not to want to be in control. It wants to have kind of more space and more possibility. It's almost like they're at cross purposes in his chart.
Right. So this reminds me of something you said the other night on, I think it was the Sunday night show, when you're going through all the Virgo celebrities.
Yeah.
And you kept running across serial killers, and that was kind of surprising.
Right.
So I have a thought on that, and it's like, I think that Virgo wants to fix things and create perfection, and when they see how fucked up the world is, and that they can't really fix all the stuff they want to, I think that like it makes something snap, and they're just like, fuck it.
Wow.
Like, because
that's
they
powerful, Mark. Because I'm a Virgo too. So I kind of get what
Yeah.
you're saying. And it's like Virgo can go psycho if they get really pissed, but it takes a lot to get them pissed.
Yeah, because at the heart of Virgo is just, helping
Yeah.
and being of service. But that's when you see how nuts everything gets. Then because I've got the Uranus Pluto conjunction in Virgo, so I can flip into that once in a while. So it's like it makes you a bit crazy seeing that, like, no matter how much you do or try to help stuff, there's certain things you can't fix, and it can be hard to wrap your brain around that.
We should do a show on Virgo psychos because that's like a funny topic,
Oh.
and there's some reality to it, a lot of reality to it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Hey, look, check out Shanahan's Pluto, Brock Purdy's Venus. Over here.
So that's
over here, right? Shanahan's on the outside. Purdy's over right there. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Look at that.
Okay. Purdy's the middle.
Yep.
Purdy's the middle.
And Shanahan's on the outside. Look at that.
Venus conjunct Uranus. Yeah.
Is that Uranus? My bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
no.
still though, right? Like sudden, all
Same.
boom, there he is. There's your guy. Mr.
Right. And look, I mean, wasn't Purdy like fourth string at the beginning of the season last year?
Yes. Yeah.
Surprise gift, You draft Trey Lance and you had Garofalo, all these injuries, you think you're done for the year. And then like Purdy is Shanahan's surprise gift. Because last man drafted, right? Was it?
Mr. Relevant. Yeah.
So there you go. Venus conjunct Shanahan's Jupiter. There's a Venus-Uranus conjunction. Or yeah. Uranus. So that was a surprise gift for Shanahan.
And Purdy,
And then even though it's not
note.
conjunct.
Purdy's got the true note. Leo, is that right? Is that what that is?
Yeah, 5 Leo.
And conjunct the 49er Saturn in Leo. Wow. That's kind of destined.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that works in like, charts between two people and stuff too. When there's a Saturn node so like I look at like synastry for relationships different than everybody else. I don't jump to the Mercury, Venus, that like 'cause to me, like anybody can date for 2 weeks, right? Regardless of what your charts are. So I always assume the question is there long-term potential? So when you see a Saturn North node make up like that, then that shows, good long-term potential because there's like growth and there's like a learning relationship there with Saturn involves someone being the teacher, or better yet, because the 49ers are a company. So Saturn, there's the corporation, and Brock Purdy's future North Node is conjunct the Saturn of the company he works for, which is the 49ers.
So did you use a 12 noon chart for Kyle?
Yeah. The 49ers are the only one that have a correct time chart out of those three.
And okay, so Purdy's Mars is in Aquarius. I thought it was in Leo. Okay, opposite sign. I think that's pretty good improvisation.
Yeah, so he's got that Venus Mars square too. That more surprises.
Interesting.
Studies.
The Seattle Seahawks, I'm wondering, are they just completely not in the ball game this year? Astrologically, because they were kind of my sleeper team in the NFC.
So I guess we should maybe talk about Libras for a minute.
Okay.
So my problem with even though I'm born in Ohio, my college team is West Virginia. So my whole family's from West Virginia. My aunt worked in admissions at WVU, and I had 4 or 5 cousins that went there. One played football there. So Geno Smith is 10-10, and then who did you ask me about?
The Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, so there's another Libra. Popped in the-
Is it Pete Carroll, a Virgo or Taurus? He's an Earth sign, right?
I think he's Virgo.
I think he's a Virgo too.
So with the Seahawks, here we'll just do the terrible triumvirate again. So the problem, oh, Jared Goff is the other one I'm thinking of.
Okay.
That's the other Libra that's in my
Libra,
head.
right? He's a Libra.
So I kind of don't like when the South Node's going over planets. That to me is kind of you're going to trip on an Achilles heel, or find out you made a lot of bad draft choices, or like
Trevor
something.
Lawrence is a Libra too.
Who?
Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, and he looks like it too. He's very pretty.
Right. He's like totally Venus, right? Even Jared Goff's got a little Venus in him. You can see it.
So the Seahawks are heavy Libra. I mean, Mercury, Pluto, Mars, Venus, stellium there between 7 and 13.
Bit of a Mars return.
Yeah, and Mars going over their Pluto. So Pete Carroll always gets him playing well. Oh, what did I do?
So Pete Carroll, probably not conjunct the sun, but pretty close, I bet, right?
Yeah,
Seahawks sun.
I hit the wrong thing here. I've got all three of them. Alrighty. Okay. So the inner chart is Pete Carroll. The middle chart is Gino.
Yeah, look at that. 22 Virgo, 20 Virgo. So he found a home in Seattle, man.
Yeah. So my concern for all of them would be that there's a little bit of regression. But what I didn't like about Seattle's preseason was the Jimba getting hurt, and then I think didn't Walker get dinged a little bit, and so
Yeah.
So if you get Walker and Charbonnet and those three receivers on the field at the same time, I mean, that's Geno Smith doesn't even have to play good. He just has to throw it into the right zip code. That's going to be an unstoppable offense. I mean, a Lockett and Metcalf themselves are already enough to deal with, but you throw the Jigba in there and those two running backs, I mean, that can be lethal. Seattle just doesn't have a lot of, they don't have terrible transits other than that South Node stuff, but they don't have a ton of strong stuff. I mean, there's like Uranus trying their sun and stuff, but like it doesn't get exact. It stays within a couple degrees of being exact. So I see Seattle being similar to last year. I think they're going to be difficult to play against, but I see them being in the 8 and 9, 10 and 7 area. So now the benefit they have there is the Rams should be better, but the Rams are not going to be what they were 2 years ago, and the Cardinals are going to be absolute trash. So, there's
I
a
think
chance
it's
to
quite
go
possible the Cardinals.
3-1.
I think it's quite possible the Cardinals won't win a game this year.
Wow.
The only thing I like about the Cardinals is it seems like that coach is pretty, like he's adding some structure to it, where I kind of feel the last few years it was just like Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury, like just trying to put up numbers and stuff. And then it's like Cliff just got like bored or something at some point of trying to get Kyler to do stuff. And So there seems to be they have a lot of togetherness and stuff this year, but I don't know for the Cardinals. But yeah, just the talent level is just abysmal.
Yeah, you got gutted, totally gutted. All right, so let's put a wrap on this thing here because I know it's pretty late where you are, Mark, and I really appreciate you hanging out with us. So let's go over
great.
astrologically who you like in the AFC and the NFC.
So I kind of like like my top four in the AFC are probably Miami, Cincinnati, Chiefs, and Chargers or Jacksonville, depending on the matchups there. Cincinnati and Miami have the best transits, I think.
Okay.
Then in the NFC, it's 49ers, and then I think a mix of like Philly, Dallas, Minnesota, Detroit in this second tier. I think Atlanta win their division maybe, but I don't know that they can really do anything in the playoffs when you can't pass. But I mean, to me, San Francisco, Cincinnati again looks like, and if you go look at the previous two Cincinnati, San Francisco Super Bowls, there are some of the outer planets are at the same degrees as some of the outer planets were at that time. Not necessarily the same planet, but like Pluto's kind of where Neptune was at one of those Super Bowls, and a few things like that I'd went back and noticed. So if there's no
Yeah, I think that
chicanery,
Super Bowl would have been the '94 Super Bowl.
yeah,
That's when Neptune was in Capricorn. So the Niners were 81,
and 89,
81, 84, 89, 90, 88, 89, and 94. Those are their Super Bowls. Yeah. All right. If you had to pick one dark horse team, let's say there are people out, and by the way, I'm like, not a heavy duty betting guy, but if I really don't bet, every now and then I may place a bet, but I really don't do a lot of it. But if we were going to say, hey, here's a dark horse, if you wanted to throw some money at these two teams, who would you pick? Again, based on astrology, personnel, etc.
So I would say Miami and I think as far as dark horses, probably Atlanta would for NFC, probably Atlanta. A team with tremendous unlimited upside is the Chargers. So that would be a third. Just if that rookie receiver, and if they keep Keenan Allen and Mike Williams healthy with Herbert and that offensive coordinator they got from Dallas, like the Chargers could win it all because there is them and the Chiefs have the same chart, but there's I think Pluto completes an Earth Grand Trine, I believe, in their charts.
Okay, Al, let's get your picks. Let's get your favorites and your dark horses.
Okay. So one thing I pay attention to primarily is the narrative. And, we just did an incredible show on the aeons of football where there's this direct correlation between the geopolitical atmosphere of the decade and the Super Bowl champions. That being said, my pick for the AFC would be the Jets because I think that Aaron Rodgers is going to be at the forefront of legalizing psychedelic drugs. And I think that's the narrative that I see. And I see him as the main actor. A Super Bowl championship ring would really add to his character with that initiative. So that's why I like the Jets, bottom line. As far as the football and the personnel goes, they got some players. And I look to see what the hidden hand that throws those flags, what's the bigger agenda that's controlling that hand. So that's what I look for. So I'd say the Jets in the AFC, the Seattle Seahawks in the NFC, just as a dark horse, because they have so much upside. I'm a futures better, so I place bets on what's going to happen in the future. They have so much upside because nobody's picking them, in my view. And I see Geno Smith as somebody who has an interesting name. That's another thing I look for. And it's just, I could explain that, especially with the Rams. Anyways, so those would be my two main teams. As far as dark horses go, I like what you're saying with the Miami Dolphins as a dark horse. For me, they're a dark horse because they're not really on my radar. But I like what you're saying a little bit with that. Actually, you know what? Scratch that. I'm a big Josh Allen fan. I just like him. Okay, so I'll be rooting for the Buffalo Bills if the Jets get knocked out. The Patriots probably going to get knocked out. And then in the NFC, why not go with the Cowboys, the great American brand? And I'll sort of reflect a prediction that Rob made, a few months ago, that being the Bills and the Cowboys. That could be my backup pick for this year.
Yeah, if you want to, I guess if you're looking from a geopolitical aspect, I think Atlanta, Miami would be a play there.
Okay. Why is that?
Just going back from the Stacey Abrams thing all the way to the Brian Kemp thing to the last election, it's like Georgia is just involved in everything. I mean, they got Trey Young for the Hawks, and they pulled all those upsets and made it to the conference finals. We got Georgia with back-to-back national championships.
The Braves, right?
Wow.
The Braves.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, man. Wow.
So that they seem to want to keep Georgia in everyone's mindset at this point.
And we're going into an election year where they could be a swing state as well.
Well, CNN is based out of Atlanta, right?
Wow.
I mean, when I picked the Cowboys and the Bills, I picked the Bills because of the relationship with Taurus in the bull, and I think aren't they in line for a new stadium? Is that happening in Buffalo? Right. Usually, when teams are about to get a new stadium, the NFL kind of makes the path to the Super Bowl a little bit easier. Hint, hint, the Rams, right?
It's not the only time it's happened, I think.
No, there's more than a few times.
Yeah.
So they match a lot of criteria, right? Astrologically, new stadium, Damar Hamlin, right? There's your narrative.
Yeah.
Talking point. And then Josh Allen's is he a late Taurus or early Gemini? I think he's an early Gemini, right?
Yes, I believe that is correct.
Okay.
So I would say that makes sense from the AFC side of things. And if you're gonna throw the Bills in there, you may as well throw the rootin' tootin' Cowboys in. But I'm gonna go on record, and this has very little to do with astrology. Maybe. But I think the Saints are actually gonna play well. And I'm not a huge Dennis Allen fan, even though he's born on September 22nd. I have to kind of root for my time twin. He's a better defensive coach and coordinator than an offensive coordinator. But I think Derek Carr is in his element in a place like New Orleans. And I think that's a city that could really embrace him. And being an Aries, he could just really get into being a leader in that city. And I don't know what's going to happen with that. Who's the wide receiver that just kind of disappeared?
Michael Thomas?
Yeah. What is his story? Like, he's kind of an X factor. What's his astrology? I'm curious.
Because what's interesting is they drafted a running back and they picked up Jamal Williams to
Jamal
score all
Williams is
those
a beast.
touchdowns for the Lions.
He's a beast, man.
And then not only did they have Chris Olave last year, but they had another rookie wide receiver from last year that really tore it up at the end. So they've really got some weapons there. So Michael Thomas is a Pisces.
That's what I thought, right? He fucking disappeared, right? He just like dissolved into thin air. Like, I've got these injuries. He was like the Kawhi Leonard of the NFL.
So what's funny, sort of dark funny, mostly dark, is transiting. You said he disappeared. Transiting Neptune is right on his Mercury right now. They're over the last year or so. And so that's actually, when you look at missing people and people that like disappear and are never heard from again, Neptune conjunct their Mercury is one of the signatures of that. That's one of the things that I see most often.
And he's got Mercury retrograde in Pisces. Wow.
Yeah.
I got to say, I don't like his chart.
There's yes, kind of. He's got a Mercury retrograde trine Pluto retrograde, and then a Moon Mars conjunction.
I don't like that Moon Mars conjunction. It's way too booty. Like, it's almost exact. It's way too booty.
Yeah.
And even though it trines Sun Mercury, like, that only works when he's into it. If he's not into it, no.
Yeah. And then there's that Saturn in Aquarius. He's got a lot of weird stuff. He's got a Saturn Chiron opposition. That's a weird. There's a fire green trine also, North Node Venus Chiron.
But those are odd. Those are odd to have in a grand trine too.
Yeah. No, that's
with that Chiron
1993.
Chiron and Leo, he strikes me as a guy that no matter how good he is or how much money he makes, it's not enough. That's what it feels like.
And that
Chiron's opposite Saturn, isn't it?
Yeah. And that Moon Mars conjunction in Cancer can kind of be like hoarder type stuff. It's like, it never has enough money.
So what do you, Mark, what's your thoughts on Casmi? Like, do you think that Mars cancels out the moon and vice versa there?
I think it makes them double strong.
That's what I think too.
Because that's just a lot of so that can't having Cancer moon, so that Cancer moon wants to be protective, but it's kind of like in an inward nurturing way. But that Mars Cancer will really trigger that the mother crab thing of the moon Cancer. It'll make it even like the pinchers really come out, and they're both trying the sun, so
I think
some passive aggressiveness in there.
I think that square to Jupiter can make him lazy, right? Can you see that? Jupiter Mars square, like that can make him just totally complacent.
So Jupiter and Libra square, Moon and Cancer is, I don't know, what do you want to eat? I mean,
he needs a handler. This guy needs a handler.
Yeah.
And Mark, this has been awesome. And I know you stayed a lot longer than you probably had planned on, but
No problem.
You bring so much to the table, and we'll get you back on. Like, let's get about maybe 4 weeks under our belt, and then we'll bring it back on. We'll compare some notes, and
Okay.
maybe look at some breakout players, because there's a bunch of rookies that nobody really knows about, and we might be able to sonic symbolism with baseball and
Okay.
that whole world. But
Yeah.
but we'll be back next week, and we'll be live. So, Mark, thanks again, and I'll see you out there in the internets. And this is it. Serious Sports. Take good care. Bye for now.
Thank
See you
you.
guys.
Thanks. Bye.
That was the great Mark Matheny, Rabbit Hole Astrology, and we're 3 hours into tonight's show. Once again, I want to thank Mark, and I want to thank for stopping by the chat, hanging out with people. And you go to his website, rabbitholeastrology.com. And we'll be back next week with another edition of Serious Sports, a week of the NFL under our belt, another week of college football. And I think we're working on a show, hopefully, with our buddy Christopher Gardner. He doesn't know it yet, but we're going to try to recruit him and do a whole college football show. And I actually have our first interview lined up here, and it's with former Raider and two-time Pro Bowler Henry Lawrence. And that'll be really interesting. We get to talk some old-time Raider football. We'll take a look at Henry's chart. And he was part of the great offensive line with Gene Upshaw and Dave Dalby and Mickey Marvin. Prior to that, George Bueller, Art Shell, one of the greatest offensive lines in pro football history. So he just agreed to be on the show. We just have to work out the details. The big man, Henry Lawrence, joining us from Florida. And we have a lot more to look forward to on Serious Sports. So thanks for being here. Al Dawg would thank you, but he's not here. But I'll thank you for him. And stay serious. Robert Phoenix, come catch me over on the 11th house for tomorrow's Astro weather. Take care, everybody, and bye for now.